The wind came down off the mountains like something with teeth. It tore through the valley where Black Hollow Ranch sat wedged between frozen timber and open grazing land that hadn't seen livestock in weeks. Snow had fallen for 3 days straight, then stopped just long enough to let the cold settle in deep. The kind of cold that made wood crack inside the walls. The kind that turned breath to ice before it left your mouth. Inside the main house, the nursery had gone quiet. That was the first problem. Garrick Hale stood in the hallway outside the room where his son had been dying for the better part of a week, and he listened to the silence the way a man listens to his own execution being prepared. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with hands that knew cattle and rope and hard ground. But none of that meant a damn thing here. In this hallway, with that door closed and the silence pressing out from behind it like something physical, he was as useless as he'd ever been in his life. The doctor was still in there, Dr. Mercer Vale. Respected, educated back east, a man who delivered half the children in the county and buried the other half with professional sympathy and clean paperwork. He'd been living at the ranch for 4 days now, overseeing the infant's care with the kind of authority that made questions seem like insults. Garrick had stopped asking questions 2 days ago. That was the second problem. He pressed his palm against the doorframe and felt the cold seeping through the wood. The whole house was cold. They'd kept the nursery warm. Dr. Vale had insisted on it, said the child needed heat to fight the fever, but the rest of the house had gone cold as a grave. Dorian Pike, the ranch foreman, had been managing the staff and the supplies and all the small necessities that kept a house running while the master of it stood useless in hallways. Dorian was good at that, managing, organizing, making sure things ran smooth even when they were falling apart. Garrick had trusted him for 6 years. That was about to become the third problem, though he didn't know it yet. The door opened. Dr. Vale stepped out, closing it carefully behind him. He was a lean man, narrow through the face, with wire-rimmed glasses that caught the lamplight and hid his eyes. He carried his medical bag in one hand and a certain expression that Garrick had seen before, the expression doctors wore when they were about to deliver bad news with professional distance. "Mr. Hale." "Don't," Garrick said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Just tell me." Vale set the bag down on the hall table. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with a handkerchief, put them back on. Buying time. "The child is resting. The fever remains high. We've administered another dose of the calming tincture to help him sleep through the worst of it. He was crying earlier." "Yes. Now he's quiet." "The tincture is effective." Garrick stared at him. "My son stops crying and you call that effective? Mr. Hale, an infant in this condition needs rest. The crying only exhausts him further. Every breath spent wailing is breath wasted. We're helping him conserve his strength. By drugging him silent." Vale's expression tightened, just slightly, just enough to show that he didn't appreciate having his medical judgment questioned by a cattleman. "By providing appropriate care under extraordinary circumstances. If you'd prefer a different approach, I'd prefer my son alive. Then I suggest you trust the process." The words landed like a shovel of dirt on a coffin. Garrick wanted to grab the man by his starched collar and slam him against the wall until some honesty fell out. But he didn't. Because what if Vale was right? What if the child really did need the medicine, the heat, the quiet? What if Garrick's instincts, the same instincts that told him something was wrong, something was off, something didn't fit, were just fear talking? He stepped back. Vale picked up his bag. "I'll return in 2 hours to check his temperature. In the meantime, keep the room warm and the door closed. The nurse knows what to do." "Where's Dorian?" "I believe he's managing the evening staff. Shall I send him to you?" "No." Garrick looked past the doctor, toward the closed nursery door. "No, I'll find him myself." Vale nodded and walked away down the hall, his footsteps precise and measured. A man in control. A man who knew his business. Garrick waited until he was gone, then opened the nursery door. The heat hit him like a wall. The room was stifling. A fire roared in the small hearth, and the windows were sealed shut with heavy curtains drawn tight. The air tasted thick, used, like breathing through wet wool. In the center of the room, the cradle sat surrounded by blankets and pillows, and inside it, barely visible beneath layers of swaddling, his son lay still. Too still. The nurse, Mrs. Cora Finch, sat in a chair near the fire. She was a broad woman, competent and stern, the kind who'd raised 9 children of her own and had opinions about how everyone else should raise theirs. She looked up when Garrick entered, her face set in practiced calm. "Mr. Hale, how is he?" "Resting, sir, just like the doctor said." Garrick moved closer to the cradle. The child's face was flushed, damp with sweat despite the stillness. His breathing was shallow and quick. Wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. "How much of the tincture did he get?" "The amount Dr. Vale prescribed." "How much, Cora?" She hesitated. 4 drops. Same as this morning. That's double what it was yesterday. The doctor increased the dosage, said the child needed deeper rest. Garrick reached down and touched his son's forehead. The skin was hot, slick. The baby didn't stir, didn't react, just lay there breathing in short, desperate little gasps that barely moved his chest. "When did he last eat?" "He wasn't hungry, sir." "Did you try?" "Dr. Vale said not to force it, said his stomach needed rest too." Garrick's hand curled into a fist. He forced it open again. "Get out." Cora blinked. "Sir?" "Out now." She stood quickly, confusion and offense warring on her face, but she didn't argue. She left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a lock turning. Garrick stood alone in the suffocating heat, staring down at his son. Eli, named for Garrick's father. Born 7 months ago in the same room, delivered by Dr. Vale with Serena screaming and Garrick pacing the hallway like he was pacing now. A healthy child. Strong lungs, good color. Serena had been so proud. Serena. He closed his eyes. She'd been gone for 3 weeks, ridden out into early winter on some errand she wouldn't explain, and she hadn't come back. They'd sent search parties. Found nothing. The snow had erased her trail, and after a week, even Dorian had suggested they stop wasting resources. Garrick had kept searching anyway, but Winter didn't care about grief, and eventually the ranch forced him to choose. Keep looking for a woman who was probably dead, or come home and try to save the child she'd left behind. He'd come home. 2 days later, Eli got sick. Now here they were. Garrick reached down and carefully pulled back one of the blankets, then another. The child was wrapped so tight he could barely move, swaddled like something being prepared for burial. He kept unwrapping. Eli's eyes flickered open, just for a second, unfocused, glassy, then closed again. "Come on, boy," Garrick whispered. "Stay with me." Nothing. He put his hand on the child's chest and felt the heartbeat. Fast. Too fast, like a bird's. The door slammed open. Garrick spun around. A woman stood in the doorway. A stranger. Dressed in a man's coat too big for her frame, with a scarf wrapped around her neck and snow melting off her boots. Her hair was dark, tangled, streaked with gray. Her face was weathered, lined, the kind of face that came from sleeping rough and eating worse. She looked like she'd walked out of a hard decade and kept walking. "Who the hell are you?" Garrick demanded. She didn't answer. She was staring past him at the cradle, her eyes sharp and focused in a way that made him step sideways on instinct, blocking her view. "I asked you a question. My name's Mara Quinn." Her voice was rough, low, not apologetic. "And you're killing that baby." Garrick felt something cold slide down his spine. "Get out of my house." "Can't do that." "The hell you can't." He moved toward her, using his size the way he'd use it on a wolf that wandered too close to the herd. "I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing here, but Serena sent me." He stopped. The name hung in the air between them like smoke. Mara's eyes didn't leave his face. "She found me 3 weeks ago. Rode half dead through a blizzard looking for me specifically. Said her baby was in danger. Said the people around him couldn't be trusted. Said if anything happened to her, I needed to get to this ranch and finish what she started." "You're lying." "She died 2 days later. Froze to death on a trail 10 miles north of here, and I buried her myself under a pine tree because the ground was too hard for anything deeper." Mara reached into her coat and pulled out something small, metallic. She tossed it to him. Garrick caught it without thinking. A ring, gold band, small engraving inside. To S. With all I am, G. His wedding ring to Serena. The floor seemed to tilt. "She said you'd know it was real if you saw that." Mara stepped further into the room, her eyes moving past him to the cradle. She also said the doctor was a coward and the foreman was a snake, and if I didn't get here fast, they'd bury the child right next to her. Garrick couldn't breathe. The ring was warm in his hand, solid, real. Now get out of my way, Mara said, before it's too late. He didn't move. She shoved past him anyway. Mara crossed to the cradle in 4 long strides, her boots tracking snow across the carpet. She looked down at Eli, her face hardening into something Garrick couldn't read. Then she started pulling blankets off the child with quick, rough movements. "What are you doing?" Garrick found his voice. "Stop! This room's a furnace. Child can't breathe, can't cool down, wrapped so tight he can't even move." She threw another blanket aside. "How long's he been like this?" "The doctor said he needed warmth." "The doctor's wrong. He's a trained physician. And I've delivered 19 children in worse conditions than this and kept 16 of them alive, which is a better record than most trained physicians I've met." Mara unwrapped the last layer and lifted Eli out of the cradle. The baby's head lolled. "When did he last eat?" "I don't—" Mrs. Finch said, "When?" "This morning." "Maybe." "Maybe?" Mara's mouth twisted. "You don't even know." Garrick felt anger rising, hot and defensive. "My wife is dead, and my son is dying, and some stranger just walked into my house claiming, 'Your son is dying because someone wants him to.'" The words cut through everything else. Mara carried Eli to the window and yanked the curtains open. Cold air leaked in around the edges of the glass. She held the child up to it, letting the cooler air touch his face. "What the hell are you doing?" Garrick moved toward her, waking him up. "He needs rest." "He needs to breathe." Mara turned to face him, the baby limp in her arms. "This child's been overdosed on sleeping tincture, overheated, overfed when he was fed at all, and wrapped tight enough to restrict his breathing. That's not medicine, that's suffocation with paperwork." "That's insane." "Is it?" She tilted her head. "Then explain why he got sick 2 days after your wife disappeared. Explain why the doctor keeps increasing doses instead of decreasing them. Explain why a healthy infant is dying under professional care in a warm house with plenty of food." Garrick opened his mouth, closed it. He couldn't. Mara nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She turned back to the window and opened it. The cold rushed in like water breaking through a dam. The fire in the hearth flickered. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. "Are you out of your mind?" Garrick lunged forward. Mara sidestepped him, moving to the wash basin near the door. She grabbed the pitcher and poured water into the basin with one hand, still holding Eli with the other. "Stop," Garrick said. "Whatever you think you're doing—" She dunked the baby's face in the water. Garrick roared and grabbed her arm, yanking her back. Water splashed across the floor. Mara twisted out of his grip with surprising strength, pulling Eli up and out of the basin, water streaming down the child's face. "You're killing him!" Garrick shouted. The baby gasped. One sharp, violent intake of breath. Then another. Then a scream. Eli screamed like the world was ending, his face red, his little fist clenched, his whole body rigid with outrage and shock and life. Mara held him upright, supporting his head, letting him scream himself hoarse. The nursery door burst open again. Dr. Vale stood there, his face white with fury. Behind him, Cora and Dorian Pike crowded into the doorway. "What is the meaning of this?" Vale's voice was ice. "Who is this woman?" Garrick couldn't answer. He was staring at his son. At the baby who'd been silent and still for days, now screaming loud enough to wake the dead. Mara looked at the doctor. Her expression was flat, unreadable. "I'm the woman who just saved your patient. You assaulted an infant. I shocked him awake before your medicine killed him." Vale's jaw clenched. "Mr. Hale, I must insist this person be removed immediately. She has no medical training, no authority." "She has my wife's wedding ring," Garrick said quietly. The room went still. Dorian stepped forward. He was a solid man, compact and controlled, with a face that knew how to arrange itself into whatever expression the situation required. Right now it was showing concern. "Garrick, I don't know what this woman told you, but—" "Serena's dead," Garrick said. "She died 3 weeks ago." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Dorian recovered first. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but if this woman claims to have seen Serena, she could be lying, using the ring to gain access to—" She described the engraving, which anyone could know if they'd stolen— "Dorian," Garrick's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Shut up." The foreman's mouth closed. Garrick looked at Mara, at the stranger holding his screaming son, at the woman who'd walked into his house and torn apart everything he thought he knew in less than 5 minutes. "What did Serena tell you?" Mara met his eyes. "Everything." They moved to Garrick's study. Dr. Vale protested. Dorian argued for caution. Cora stood wringing her hands in the hallway, torn between professional loyalty and the undeniable fact that the baby was now crying, actually crying, for the first time in 3 days. Garrick ignored all of them. He took Eli from Mara's arms, carried the still screaming child to Cora, and told her to feed him, actually feed him. Then he walked Mara down the hallway, into his private study, and closed the door. The room was cold. The fire had gone out hours ago. Garrick didn't bother relighting it. He moved to the desk, set the ring down on the surface, and turned to face her. "Talk." Mara pulled off her wet coat and dropped it on a chair. Underneath she wore layers, a man's shirt, a worn vest, pants tucked into boots that had seen better years. She looked like a ranch hand, or a drifter, or someone who'd learned to survive in places where survival wasn't guaranteed. "Serena came looking for me 3 weeks ago," Mara said. "Found me working a mining camp up in the Northern Territory. She'd ridden hard, alone, in weather that should have killed her. When I asked why, she said she needed someone who understood weak infants and false medicine and powerful men protecting themselves." "Why you?" "Because 10 years ago, I tried to stop a doctor from killing a child with the wrong treatment. Rich family, respected physician. I was just a midwife nobody listened to." Mara's voice was flat. "The baby died. The doctor blamed me. The family buried the truth along with their son. I lost everything. And Serena knew this how? Because she'd been investigating, looking into infant deaths in the county, asking questions about doctors, about treatments, about who benefited when children didn't make it to their first birthday." Mara leaned against the desk. "She found my case, found the records they tried to hide, and she realized the same thing was about to happen to her son." Garrick felt something cold spreading through his chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Eli wasn't sick by accident. He got sick exactly 2 days after Serena left. He got worse every day under Dr. Vale's care. The treatments that should have helped didn't. The medicine that should have calmed him knocked him unconscious. And throughout all of it, someone kept detailed records of his declining condition." Mara pulled a folded paper from her vest. "Records that would be very useful if someone needed to prove the child died of natural causes." She handed him the paper. Garrick unfolded it. It was a medical log. Dr. Vale's handwriting, dated entries tracking Eli's symptoms, treatments, responses. Professional. Thorough. The kind of documentation that would satisfy any inquiry, but in the margins, in pencil, someone else had written notes. Increase dosage if stable. Maintain heat regardless of fever. Do not allow external interference. The handwriting wasn't Vale's. It was Dorian's. Garrick's hands started shaking. "Serena found this 2 days before she left," Mara said. "Hidden in Dorian's office. She copied it and rode north to find me because she knew if she confronted him directly, she'd end up dead. She was right. You're telling me my foreman, a man I've trusted for 6 years, is trying to murder my son. I'm telling you your foreman stands to gain control of this ranch if your son dies before his first birthday. I'm telling you the doctor is either complicit or too cowardly to admit he's being used. And I'm telling you Serena died trying to get help because she knew no one here would believe her." Garrick set the paper down before he tore it in half. "This is insane." "Is it?" Mara's eyes were hard. "Then go ask your foreman why he's got legal papers prepared for contingent ownership. Ask your doctor why he keeps drugging a child who should be getting stronger. Ask yourself why everyone told you to stop searching for Serena and focus on the baby instead." "Because the baby was dying." "Exactly." The word landed like a gunshot. Garrick stared at her, at this stranger who'd walked into his life carrying his dead wife's wedding ring and a conspiracy he didn't want to believe, but the baby was crying now. After 3 days of silence, Eli was screaming his lungs out in the nursery, and that changed everything. "What do you want?" Garrick asked finally. "I want to finish what Serena started." "Which is?" "Keep your son alive long enough to prove who's trying to kill him. Garrick laughed. It came out bitter, sharp. And I'm supposed to just trust you? A woman I've never met, making accusations against people I've known for years? No, Mara said. You're supposed to trust your wife. She picked up the ring from the desk and held it out to him. Garrick looked at it, at the small circle of gold that Serena had worn every day since their wedding, the ring he'd put on her finger and promised to love her through everything. She'd died wearing it, and her last act had been to send it back to him with a warning. He took the ring. 1 week, he said. You've got 1 week to prove this. I'll need access to the house, the nursery, the records. Fine. And Dorian and the doctor can't know what I'm doing. How am I supposed to explain you? Mara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Tell them I'm the midwife Serena hired before she left. Tell them I'm here to help with the baby. Tell them whatever you want. Just make sure they don't run before I get what I need. Garrick nodded slowly. And if you're wrong, if this is all just grief and coincidence and I'm letting a stranger tear my household apart for nothing, then your son still lives, Mara said, and you can throw me out yourself. He studied her face, the hard lines, the weathered skin, the eyes that had seen too much and stopped apologizing for it. Why? He asked. Why do this? You don't know me. You didn't know Serena. Why risk everything for a child that isn't yours? Mara was quiet for a long moment. Because 10 years ago, she said finally, I tried to save a baby and failed. And I've been living with that failure every day since. So when your wife rode through a blizzard and begged me for help, I couldn't say no. She picked up her coat. Besides, I'm tired of watching powerful men bury their mistakes. She walked to the door. Mara, Garrick said. She paused. If you're lying to me, I'll make you regret it. If I'm lying, she said, your son will be dead in 3 days anyway. So I guess we'll both regret it. She left. Garrick stood alone in his cold study, holding his dead wife's ring and a piece of paper that accused his most trusted advisor of conspiracy to murder. Outside, the wind howled. And in the nursery, his son kept screaming. For the first time in a week, Garrick prayed the screaming wouldn't stop. The morning came gray and bitter. Garrick hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his study, reading through ranch records he'd signed without questioning, looking for patterns he'd been too trusting to see. The ledgers were meticulous. Dorian's handwriting filled page after page. Supply orders, payroll, contracts, land assessments. Everything organized, everything justified, everything perfect, too perfect. He'd found the contingency papers around 3 a.m, buried in a stack of routine filings. Legal language that made his head hurt, but the core was simple enough. If Eli died before reaching 1 year of age, temporary ranch management would transfer to Dorian Pike pending resolution of inheritance disputes. Temporary. The word sat on the page like a snake coiled in tall grass. Garrick heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Measured, deliberate. He knew the sound of Dorian's walk the way he knew his own heartbeat. The door opened without knocking. Dorian stepped inside, his face arranged in careful concern. He was dressed for work already, clean shirt, vest, boots polished despite the mud season. The kind of man who maintained standards even when the world fell apart around him. Garrick, you look terrible. Didn't sleep. I'm not surprised. Dorian closed the door behind him. After last night's excitement, I imagine none of us did. Is the child stable? He's eating, crying, acting like a baby should act. That's good. That's very good. Dorian moved to the window, looking out at the ranch yard where men were already moving through morning routines. Though I have to say, the method that woman used was rather extreme. It worked. This time. But drowning an infant in a wash basin isn't exactly standard medical practice. Garrick set down the pen he'd been holding. Neither is drugging one unconscious. Dorian turned. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Dr. Vale was following established treatment protocols. Was he? You doubt his competence? I'm starting to doubt a lot of things. The silence stretched between them like wire pulling tight. Dorian broke it with a careful smile. Grief does that. Makes us question everything. Second-guess the people trying to help. He moved closer to the desk. Which is why I think we should discuss this woman. Mara Quinn. Who is she really? What proof do we have that Serena actually sent her? Garrick held up the ring. Dorian looked at it. His smile faded. That could be stolen. She knew about the engraving, which proved she had access to the ring. Not that Serena gave it to her willingly. Dorian's voice took on a harder edge. Think about it, Garrick. A stranger appears during a crisis, claims your dead wife sent her, and immediately starts making accusations against the people who've been loyal to you for years. Does that sound like someone trying to help? Or someone taking advantage? She saved Eli. Did she? Or did she shock him awake temporarily while the real medicine Dr. Vale administered finally started working? Dorian leaned against the desk. I'm not saying she's definitely lying. I'm saying we should be careful. Verify her story before we let her tear this household apart. Garrick studied his foreman's face. The reasonable expression, the logical arguments, the concern that looked so genuine it almost made him doubt what he'd read in those margin notes. Almost. Where were you? Garrick asked quietly. When Serena left. Dorian blinked. What? 3 weeks ago. When she rode out. Where were you? Here. Managing the ranch. Why? You didn't think it was strange? Her leaving alone in early winter? Of course I did. I told you we should send men after her immediately. But you also told me to stop searching after a week. Dorian's jaw tightened. Because we were wasting resources looking for someone who clearly didn't want to be found. Because you had a ranch to run and an infant son who needed you here. He straightened. I was trying to help you make hard decisions. That's my job. Is it also your job to prepare contingency ownership papers? The temperature in the room dropped. Dorian went very still. Who told you about those? Does it matter? Yes, it matters a great deal. Those are private legal documents prepared at the request of your attorney to protect the ranch in case... He stopped. Started again. They're standard precautionary measures. I never authorized them. Your attorney did. After Serena disappeared and Eli got sick, someone had to think about worst-case scenarios, Garrick. Someone had to make sure this ranch didn't fall apart if my son died. If the worst happened, yes. Dorian's voice was tight now, controlled. I'm sorry if that sounds cold, but someone has to be practical. Someone has to think past grief and prepare for reality. And you'd be that someone. I'd be the person holding things together, like I've done for 6 years. Garrick stood up slowly. He was bigger than Dorian, heavier, the kind of size that made men step back on instinct. But Dorian held his ground, and that told Garrick something he didn't want to know. The foreman wasn't afraid. He should be. Get out, Garrick said. Garrick, out, now. Before I forget, you've worked for me long enough to earn a conversation instead of a beating. Dorian's face flushed. Anger. Finally. The mask slipping just enough to show what lived underneath. You're making a mistake, listening to that woman, believing her poison. She's using your grief against you. I said get out. Dorian stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. When you realize what she really is, he said quietly, don't expect me to clean up the mess. He left. Garrick sat back down and put his head in his hands. The door opened again. I told you to... He looked up. Mara stood in the doorway, holding Eli. The baby was awake, alert, tracking movement with eyes that looked clearer than they had in days. Cora said you wanted to see him, Mara said. Garrick crossed the room in 3 steps and took his son. Eli squirmed, made a fussy noise, then settled against his father's chest. The weight of him felt real, solid, alive. How is he? Better. Ate twice already. Cried himself hoarse around dawn, but settled after. Temperature's down. Breathing's normal. Mara watched him with those sharp eyes. Whatever they were giving him is working its way out. How long? Day or 2. Depends on how much they dosed him with. She moved into the room, closed the door. I heard voices. Dorian. What'd he say? That you're lying, that the papers are precautionary, that I'm letting grief cloud my judgment. He's smart. He's desperate. Mara nodded slowly. Smart and desperate. Worst combination. She sat down in the chair Dorian had vacated. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to do it. Garrick looked at her. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you well enough to see you're angry.
And I know anger makes men stupid unless they channel it right. She leaned forward. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep you visible and reasonable while I dig deeper. We're going to let Dorian and the doctor think they're winning. And we're going to gather enough evidence that when this breaks open, nobody can call it grief or madness. How?
Start with the doctor. He's the weak point. Vale? He's not a killer, just a coward, which means he'll break if you push the right way. Mara stood. But not directly. If you confront him, he'll run to Dorian. We need to split them first. Garrick shifted Eli in his arms. The baby grabbed his finger and held on. How? Make Vale doubt Dorian. Make him think the foreman's setting him up to take the fall. Cowards turn on each other fast when they smell consequences. And you know this how? Because I've watched it happen before. Something dark crossed her face. 10 years ago, when they came after me, it was the same. Doctor and moneyman working together until it got dangerous. Then the doctor folded and the moneyman buried him along with the evidence. What happened to the doctor? Died 6 months later. Fell off his horse drunk. Probably not an accident. Mara looked out the window. The moneyman's still alive, though. Still respectable. Still protected. Garrick felt something cold settle in his gut. Is that what you want here? Revenge? No, I want the child to live. Revenge would just be a bonus. The honesty of it was almost funny. Garrick looked down at his son. At the small face, the tiny fingers gripping his own. He thought about Serena riding through a blizzard to find this woman, dying on a frozen trail trying to save the child she'd left behind. All right, he said, we do it your way. But if this goes wrong, your son dies, and Dorian gets everything he wants. So let's make sure it doesn't go wrong. She took Eli back, settled him against her shoulder with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times before. The baby made a small noise and relaxed. Where'd you learn to do that? Garrick asked. Told you, delivered 19 children, raised 3 of my own before... She stopped. Before what?
Before I lost them. Her voice was flat. Cholera, 12 years ago. Husband and all 3 children in 1 month. She looked at him. So yeah, I know what it's like to watch children die. And I know what it's like when someone could have stopped it, but didn't. Garrick didn't know what to say to that. Mara saved him from having to figure it out. I'm taking him back to the nursery. You need to eat something and pretend you're not about to tear this place apart. Act normal. Let them think last night was an aberration. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with Mrs. Finch about medical records and dosage schedules, and then I'm going to search Dorian's office. He'll notice. Not if he's busy elsewhere. She moved to the door. Give him a problem to solve, something that needs his attention for a few hours. Like what? You're a ranch owner. Make something up. Broken fence, missing cattle, whatever keeps him out of the house. She paused. And Garrick, when you talk to him, be angry, not suspicious. Just angry about last night and needing space. He'll think he's winning. She left before he could respond. Garrick stood alone in his study, watching the gray light creep across the floor. Somewhere in the house, his son was alive. Somewhere in the house, the men he trusted were planning murder. And somewhere in the winter outside, his wife was buried under a pine tree he'd never see. He walked to the window and looked out at Black Hollow Ranch, the land he'd built, the legacy he'd fought to secure, the future he'd promised Serena they'd share with their children. It had all been an illusion. Now it was time to see what was real. The kitchen was warm when Garrick entered, and the smell of coffee hit him like a physical thing. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, hadn't thought about food. His body was running on anger and fear, and something that felt like grief but sharper. Cora was at the stove, cooking breakfast for the hands. She looked up when he entered, her face uncertain. Mr. Hale. Cora. He poured coffee into a tin cup. How's the staff? Confused, sir. After last night, the baby crying, that woman. She hesitated. Is it true? About Mrs. Hale? Yes. Her hand went to her mouth. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Nobody told us. Because I didn't know until last night. Garrick drank the coffee. It was strong enough to strip paint. Mara Quinn is the midwife Serena hired before she left. She's here to help with Eli. A midwife. Cora's voice was careful. Not a doctor. No, not a doctor. Dr. Vale won't like that.
Dr. Vale can adjust. Garrick set down the cup. I need you to tell me something, Cora, and I need you to be honest. She went still. Sir? The medicine you've been giving Eli, the sleeping tincture, did it seem right to you? Her eyes dropped. I'm not qualified to judge a doctor's orders. I'm not asking as a judge. I'm asking as a father. Did it seem right? Silence. Then quietly, first few doses, yes. He was fussy, needed rest. But when Dr. Vale kept increasing it and the baby got quieter instead of better, she swallowed. I asked him about it once. He said I was questioning his expertise, said if I didn't trust his judgment, I could leave. Why didn't you? Because what if he was right? What if I was wrong and the baby needed the medicine and I walked away and her voice cracked? I've raised 9 children, Mr. Hale. I know what sick looks like. And that baby wasn't getting better under treatment. He was fading. Garrick felt something hard and heavy settle in his chest. Did you tell anyone? Who would I tell? You were grieving. Mr. Pike said to follow the doctor's orders. The doctor said everything was fine. Her hands twisted in her apron. I'm just a nurse. Nobody listens to nurses. I'm listening now. She looked up at him. That woman, Miss Quinn. She knew. First thing she did when she walked in that room, she knew something was wrong, saw it faster than any of us. Because she's seen it before. What do you mean? Garrick set down the cup. Nothing. Thank you, Cora, for being honest. Mr. Hale. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Dr. Vale's been in the medicine room this morning, reorganizing supplies, he said, but he looked nervous, like he was cleaning up. Cleaning up what? Evidence, maybe. She glanced toward the doorway. And Mr. Pike's been asking questions about Miss Quinn, where she's from, how long she's staying, whether you trust her. What did you tell him? That I don't know anything, because I don't. She met his eyes. But I know something's wrong in this house. Has been since Mrs. Hale left. And if that woman can fix it, then I hope you let her. Garrick nodded slowly. Keep your eyes open. If you see anything strange, you come to me directly. Not Dorian, not the doctor, me. Yes, sir. He left the kitchen and headed for the medicine room. It was a small space off the main hallway, lined with cabinets and shelves holding the household's medical supplies. Bandages, tonics, powders, tinctures, everything organized and labeled in Dr. Vale's precise handwriting. The door was open. Vale was inside, standing at the main cabinet with his back to the hallway. He had a bottle in his hand, reading the label. Garrick watched him for a moment. The doctor's shoulders were tight, his movements careful, like a man trying very hard to look casual while doing something else entirely. Finding everything you need? Garrick asked. Vale spun around, nearly dropping the bottle. Mr. Hale, I didn't hear you. Clearly, Garrick stepped into the room. What are you doing? Taking inventory, making sure we have adequate supplies in case the child relapses. You think he will? One can never be too careful, especially after such an unorthodox intervention. Vale set the bottle back on the shelf. Though I must say, the baby does seem improved this morning. Better color, better appetite. Thanks to Mara. Vale's mouth thinned. Or thanks to the treatments I administered finally taking effect. Medical intervention doesn't always show immediate results. Neither does drowning an infant, but that worked pretty fast. That was dangerous and irresponsible. It also saved his life. Vale took off his glasses and cleaned them. The gesture was becoming familiar. A tell. The doctor did it when he was buying time to think. Mr. Hale, I understand you're under tremendous stress, the loss of your wife, the illness of your child, but you must understand that this woman, whoever she claims to be, has no medical credentials, no formal training. She's operating on folk remedies and dangerous assumptions. She's also not the one who kept increasing doses while my son got worse. The glasses stopped moving. Vale put them back on slowly. I was following standard protocols for infant fever management. Were you? Garrick moved closer. Or were you following someone else's instructions? I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly, who told you to increase the dosages? No one told me. I made those decisions based on professional judgment. Show me your notes.
Excuse me? Your medical notes. The records you've been keeping. I want to see them. Vale's face flushed. Those are confidential medical documents. For my son, which makes them my documents. I'm afraid medical ethics prevent me from... This isn't a request. The two men stared at each other. Vale broke first. He reached into his medical bag and pulled out a leather-bound journal, handed it over without a word. Garrick opened it.
The entries were there, dated, detailed, professional. But as he flipped through the pages, something became clear. There were no margin notes, no penciled additions, nothing like what Mara had shown him. This is your only record? Garrick asked. Yes. No copies? No additional documentation? Why would there be? Garrick looked at him, really looked, at the nervous hands, the defensive posture, the way Vale kept glancing toward the door like he was calculating escape routes.
You're afraid, Garrick said quietly. I'm insulted by these accusations. You're afraid of what I'll find or what Dorian will do if I keep digging. He stepped closer. Here's what I think. I think you were told to treat my son a certain way, told the treatments were standard, told not to question the dosages, and when things started going wrong, you were too proud or too scared to admit you'd been used. Vale's face went pale. That's absurd.
Then why are you reorganizing the medicine room at dawn? What are you cleaning up? Nothing. I'm cleaning up nothing. Liar. The word hung between them. Vale's hands clenched into fists. You don't understand. You don't know what you're dealing with. Then tell me. I can't. Why not? Because... Vale stopped. His shoulders sagged. Because I'm not brave enough. The admission was so quiet, Garrick almost missed it. He grabbed Vale by the arm and pulled him further into the room, out of sight of the hallway. Talk to me. Now. Before this gets worse. Vale's breath came short and fast. If I tell you, he'll destroy me. Dorian. The doctor's silence was answer enough. Garrick's grip tightened. What does he have on you? Debts. Gambling debts from back east. Enough to ruin my reputation if they came to light. Vale's voice was breaking. He found out 6 months ago. Said he could make them disappear if I helped him. Just small things at first. Adjusting reports. Recommending certain treatments. Nothing that would actually harm anyone. Until Eli. I didn't know. Vale looked up at him, eyes desperate. I swear I didn't know what he was planning. He said the child needed careful management. Said you were too emotional to make sound decisions. Said we were protecting the ranch. By killing my son? No, I thought... Vale pulled away, pacing the small room. I thought the treatments were legitimate. Aggressive, perhaps, but legitimate. And when the child got worse, Dorian said it was natural progression. Said we just needed to keep him comfortable. Comfortable. Garrick's voice was ice. You were making him comfortable while he died. I didn't realize. Not until that woman came. Not until she tore everything apart and I saw... He stopped. I saw what I'd been doing. Garrick wanted to hit him, wanted to break something, but rage wouldn't help Eli. The margin notes, the ones telling you to increase dosages, you still have those? Dorian took them, yesterday, after the woman arrived. Said it was better if there was only one official record. Convenient. He's covering his tracks, making sure everything points to natural causes and overzealous treatment at worst. Vale's voice dropped. And if this comes out, I'm the one who'll hang for it. Not him. He's made sure of that. Garrick grabbed the journal from where he'd set it down. Write it down. Everything. What Dorian told you to do, when, how, every detail you remember. He'll kill me. I'll kill you if you don't. Vale stared at him. Garrick didn't blink. You've got one chance to do the right thing. Take it. Because if my son had died and I found out you helped murder him for gambling debts, I wouldn't wait for a trial. The doctor's hands shook as he took the journal back. What will you do with it? Whatever I have to. Garrick moved to the door. Write it down. Hide it somewhere Dorian won't think to look. And don't tell anyone what you're doing. What about the woman? What about her? Can I trust her? Garrick thought about that. About Mara Quinn with her weathered face and hard eyes, about the way she'd stormed into his house and saved his son while the professionals stood around making excuses. "More than you can trust me right now," he said. He left Vale in the medicine room and headed upstairs. Mara was in the nursery, standing by the window with Eli in her arms. The morning light made her look older than she probably was. Or maybe not. Maybe life had just been harder than it should have been. "He asleep?" Garrick asked. Finally. She didn't turn around. Fought it for an hour. Stubborn. He gets that from his mother. Lucky him. Garrick moved closer. Vale broke. Now she turned. What'd he say? He told her. Everything. The gambling debts, the coercion, the margin notes, the way Dorian had positioned the doctor to take the fall. Mara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked back out the window. "Dorian's smart," she said finally. "Smarter than the man who tried this before. He's got leverage on the doctor, legal papers prepared, and a story that makes him look like the responsible one trying to save the ranch from a grieving fool. Can we prove it? If Vale writes everything down like you told him to, maybe. But Dorian will have a counter for every accusation. Say Vale's lying to save himself. Say I'm manipulating you. Say you're delusional with grief." She shifted Eli carefully. "We need something Dorian can't explain away." "Like what?" "Like proof he wanted Eli dead for reasons that go beyond ranch management." She looked at him. "Your wife was investigating something before she left. Something about infant deaths in the county. Did she keep records? If she did, I don't know where. Then we find them. Because if Serena connected Dorian to other cases, other deaths, other families," Mara's voice hardened, "then this isn't just about your ranch. It's about how many children he's killed to get what he wants." The words made Garrick's blood run cold. "You think he's done this before?" "I think men like Dorian don't start with murder. They work up to it, test boundaries, see what they can get away with." She carried Eli to the cradle and laid him down gently. "So yeah, I think if we dig deep enough, we'll find bodies." Garrick's hands clenched. Where would Serena hide records? Somewhere she could access, but he couldn't. Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Mara thought for a moment. Did she have any place that was hers? A room? A desk? Somewhere private? She had a writing room. Small space off our bedroom. She kept correspondence there. Personal things. Dorian have access to it? No, it was always locked. She had the only key. Then that's where we start. They moved quickly through the house, keeping to the back hallways where staff wouldn't see them together. Garrick's bedroom was on the second floor, a large space he hadn't slept in since Serena disappeared. The bed was made, the curtains drawn, everything frozen in place like a photograph. The writing room was through a narrow door on the far wall. It was locked. Key? Mara asked. Serena kept it with her, always. Then we break it. I'm not breaking down my wife's door. Mara looked at him. Your wife is dead, your son is alive. Which one matters more right now? The bluntness of it should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. Garrick stepped back and kicked the door just below the handle. The wood splintered. The lock broke. The door swung open. The writing room was small and tidy, a desk by the window, shelves lined with books, a chair. Everything arranged with the precision Serena had brought to every part of her life. Mara went straight to the desk and started pulling open drawers. What am I looking for? Garrick asked. Letters, records, names of other families, dates that match infant deaths. She pulled out a stack of correspondence. Anything that shows a pattern. They searched in silence, papers scattered across the desk, books pulled from shelves, the small room becoming chaos. Garrick was about to give up when his hand touched something that didn't feel like wood, a hidden compartment in the back of the bottom drawer. He pulled it out. Inside was a leather folder tied shut with string. Mara stopped what she was doing. Open it. Garrick's hands shook as he untied the string. Inside were documents, letters, newspaper clippings, and a list written in Serena's precise handwriting. Names, dates, locations, 12 families, 12 infant deaths. And next to 8 of them, one name appeared in the notes. Dorian Pike. Sweet mercy, Mara whispered. Garrick couldn't breathe. He read through the list again. Recognized some of the names. Families he knew. Ranches and homesteads scattered across the territory. All of them had lost children. All of them within the past 5 years. all of them while Dorian had been working in the area. How? Garrick's voice came out strangled. How did no one see this? Because they were different places, different circumstances, natural causes, people said. Fever, weakness, bad luck. Mara picked up one of the newspaper clippings. Nobody connects dots that far apart, especially when the man connecting them looks respectable. Garrick sat down hard. The folder fell from his hands. Papers drifted to the floor. 8 dead children. Maybe more. And he trusted the man responsible, put him in charge, given him access to his own son. I'm going to kill him, Garrick said quietly. No, Mara's voice was sharp. You're going to do this right. We take this evidence to the county sheriff. We make it official. We make sure Dorian can't run and can't talk his way out. The sheriff's 3 days' ride from here. Then we ride. And leave Eli with Dorian still in the house? Mara paused. Then we send someone else. Someone we trust. Who? Everyone here either works for me or Dorian. Anyone I send, he'll intercept. They stared at each other. We need him away from the ranch, Mara said finally. Far enough that he can't interfere while we get help. How? She thought for a moment. Then her expression changed. The northern grazing land. The winter pasture. How far is it? 2 days' ride. Why? Tell Dorian there's a problem up there. Fence down, cattle missing, something that needs immediate attention and can't wait. She started gathering the scattered papers. Send him north with a couple of hands. Once he's gone, we take Eli and these records and ride south to the sheriff. He'll know something's wrong. Not if you sell it right. Be angry. Be frustrated. Make him think you're taking it out on him because you can't take it out on anyone else. Mara met his eyes. Can you do that? Garrick thought about his son lying drugged and dying, about Serena riding through a blizzard to save him, about 8 other families who'd buried their children while Dorian walked away clean. Yeah, he said. I can do that. They spent the next hour preparing. Mara packed the documents into a waterproof case and hid them in the nursery. Garrick changed into riding clothes and worked himself into the right kind of anger, the kind that looked like frustration instead of accusation. By the time he went looking for Dorian, he didn't have to fake it. He found the foreman in the main barn checking harnesses. Dorian. The foreman looked up. Garrick, you look better. I'm not. Garrick kept his voice rough, tired. Got a report this morning. Northern fence is down, cattle scattered, storm damage, probably. Dorian frowned. How bad? Bad enough that I need someone up there fixing it before we lose half the herd. He ran a hand through his hair. And I can't go, not with Eli still recovering. I can send a couple of the hands. I need you. Garrick looked at him. I need someone I trust handling this. Someone who won't cut corners or come back with excuses. Dorian's expression shifted, pleased, like he'd been waiting for this. Of course. When do you want me to leave? Now, today. Take Morrison and Blake, get up there, assess the damage, fix what you can. Garrick turned away, making it dismissive. I'll handle things here. What about the doctor and the woman? Vale's writing up treatment plans, Mara's watching Eli. I'll manage them. Are you sure? After everything that's happened? I'm sure. Garrick faced him again. Look, I know I've been difficult, questioning everything, but you're right. Someone has to be practical. Someone has to keep this ranch running while I figure out how to be a father without a wife. The words tasted like poison, but they worked. Dorian's face softened. I understand. And I'm here. Whatever you need. I need you to fix that fence. Consider it done. Dorian headed for the door, then paused. Garrick? For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call, trusting the people who've been with you from the start. Garrick forced a smile. Yeah, I'm learning that. Dorian left. Garrick waited until he heard horses leaving the yard. Then he went to find Mara. She was in the nursery, already packing supplies into saddlebags. He's gone, Garrick said. Good. We leave in an hour. What about Vale? Tell him to keep Eli stable until we get back. Tell him if anything happens to the baby while we're gone, you'll assume he did it on purpose. Mara closed the bag. That should keep him cooperative. Garrick nodded. His heart was hammering. This is really happening. Yeah. If we're wrong, we're not wrong. You saw the list. You know what he is.
Mara picked up Eli from the cradle. The baby was awake, looking around with clear eyes. Your wife died trying to stop him. Now we finish it. Garrick looked at his son, at the child who should be dead, who would be dead if a stranger hadn't walked out of a blizzard carrying his mother's last words. Thank you, he said quietly. Mara glanced at him. For what? For not giving up. On him. On this.
She was quiet for a moment. I told you, I'm tired of watching powerful men bury their mistakes. She handed him the baby. Garrick held his son and felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The lies, the trust betrayed, the murders hidden behind respectable faces. Outside, the wind was picking up again. They had maybe a day before Dorian realized he'd been sent on a false errand, maybe less if he was smarter than they hoped. But it was enough. It had to be enough. Let's go, Mara said. They left Black Hollow Ranch riding hard toward the south, carrying an infant and evidence of serial murder, racing against time and the man who'd spent years perfecting the art of looking innocent while children died. Behind them, the house stood silent. And in the medicine room, Dr. Vale sat writing his confession with shaking hands, wondering if redemption was possible for men who'd chosen cowardice over courage. The answer, he suspected, wouldn't matter much longer. The horses didn't like the weather. Garrick could feel it in the way his mare kept fighting the bit, tossing her head, trying to turn back toward the barn. Smart animal. Knew better than to ride into a storm that was building in the north like something with intention. But they didn't have a choice. Mara rode beside him, Eli strapped against her chest in a sling she'd fashioned from blankets. The baby was quiet, bundled so tight only his face showed. His eyes were open, watching the gray sky with the serious expression infants sometimes got, like they understood more than anyone gave them credit for. They'd been riding for 3 hours. The landscape had shifted from open grazing land to rougher country, rocky outcrops, scattered pine, frozen streams cutting through draws that would run wild come spring. This was the kind of terrain that broke horses and men if you didn't respect it. How much further? Mara called over the wind. Another 6 hours to Grafton. If we don't stop. We can't stop. Garrick knew that. Knew Dorian would figure out the northern fence story was fabricated by nightfall at the latest. Knew once that happened, the foreman would come after them fast and angry and desperate, but the baby couldn't ride hard for 6 straight hours without stopping. Neither could the horses. They were going to have to risk it. There's a way station ahead, Garrick said. Old Trapper's Shelter. We can rest there for an hour. Let the horses breathe. Mara looked at the sky. Storm's coming. I know. If we get caught in it, I know. She didn't argue, just tucked her chin down to shield Eli's face from the wind and kept riding. They reached the shelter just as the first snow started falling. It wasn't much, 3 walls and half a roof, stone fireplace that hadn't seen use in months, maybe years. But it was out of the wind, and that was enough. Garrick dismounted and helped Mara down. She moved stiffly, unused to riding this hard. He led the horses under the partial roof while she carried Eli inside and checked him over. How is he? Garrick asked, pulling saddles off the tired animals. Cold, hungry, scared, probably. She was unwrapping the blankets, checking the baby's color. But alive. Garrick gathered what dry wood he could find and got a fire started. The smoke rose through gaps in the roof, and the heat barely touched the cold, but it was better than nothing. Mara sat near the flames and started nursing Eli with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this in worse conditions. The baby latched on and made small, desperate sounds. He's eating better, Garrick observed, because he's not drugged anymore. Babies know when something's wrong. They fight it until they can't fight anymore. She adjusted her position. How long until Dorian figures it out? If he rode hard to the northern range, he could be there by dark. Realize there's no fence down. Turn around immediately. Garrick did the math. We've got maybe 12 hours before he catches up. Unless he sends riders ahead. He doesn't have enough men with him for that. I made sure Morrison and Blake were the ones who went. Good workers. Loyal to me, not him. You hope. Yeah, I hope. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Snow fell through the broken roof in lazy spirals. Eli's breathing evened out as he ate. Mara spoke without looking up. Tell me about Serena. Garrick didn't expect the question. Why?
Because I rode with her for 2 days before she died, and all she talked about was you and the baby. I want to know if the man she described is the man sitting here. What did she say? That you were stubborn, loyal to a fault, that you'd trust the wrong people because you wanted to believe the best in them. Mara glanced at him. That you'd need someone to show you the truth because you'd never believe it on your own. The description stung because it was accurate. She was right, Garrick said quietly, about all of it. She also said you loved hard, that once you committed to something, you didn't let go. Mara shifted Eli to her other side. Said that's why she married you, because you made promises and kept them. Garrick stared at the fire. I promised to keep her safe. And she rode into a blizzard anyway. That's not on you. Isn't it? If I'd paid attention. If I'd seen what Dorian was. If I'd questioned the doctor when Eli got sick instead of trusting, you'd still be a man dealing with a killer who'd spent years perfecting his craft. Mara's voice was hard. Stop blaming yourself for not seeing what he spent years hiding. That's what men like Dorian count on. The guilt. The self-doubt. It makes you weak. I am weak. No. You're trusting. There's a difference. She looked at him directly. Weak men let their children die and do nothing. You're riding through a storm carrying evidence to hang the man responsible. That's not weakness. Garrick didn't know what to say to that. Eli finished eating and Mara wrapped him back up, tucking him against her shoulder. The baby made a small sound and settled. How old were yours? Garrick asked. Your children. Mara went still. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, 5, 3, and 8 months. 2 boys and a girl. What were their names? James, Peter, Catherine. She said the names like they hurt. My husband was Thomas. We had a homestead in Missouri, small place, good land. We were happy. What happened? Cholera came through in the summer of '63, moved through the settlement like fire, killed a third of us in 6 weeks. Her voice was flat, distant. Thomas went first, then James, then Peter. I thought maybe Catherine would make it. She was so small I thought maybe she was too small for the sickness to find. But it did. Yeah, it did. Mara's hand moved unconsciously to Eli's back, a protective gesture. Buried all 4 of them in 1 week. Lost the homestead 6 months later because I couldn't work it alone. Spent the next 10 years moving from place to place, doing what work I could find. Midwifery. Among other things, cleaning, cooking, whatever kept me fed. She looked at him. And yeah, delivering babies, because watching children come into the world was the only thing that made the ones I lost hurt less. Garrick understood that. The need to replace what was taken. The desperate attempt to balance the scales. The baby you tried to save, he said. 10 years ago, the one they blamed you for. What about him? Was it the same cholera? No. Bad treatment. Rich family's firstborn son got sick with fever. Doctor prescribed aggressive purging and bloodletting. Old-fashioned methods that didn't work. Mara's jaw tightened. I was just there to help with the birth aftermath, but I saw what they were doing and I knew it was killing him. Told them to stop. Begged them. They didn't listen. The doctor said I was hysterical, uneducated, that I was projecting my own losses onto their situation. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The baby died 3 days later, and when the family wanted someone to blame, the doctor pointed at me. What happened? They brought charges, said I'd interfered with medical treatment, said my folk remedies had caused complications. Mara's voice hardened. The doctor testified against me. So did the family. I had nothing. No money for a lawyer. No witnesses willing to speak for a widowed midwife against respectable people. How'd you avoid jail? Ran. Disappeared before the trial. Spent the next 10 years moving, changing my name, staying ahead of the reputation that followed me. She looked down at Eli. Until Serena found me. Until she gave me a chance to do what I couldn't do before. Save the child. Yeah. They sat in silence again. The fire was dying. The snow was coming harder. Garrick stood and checked the horses. They were nervous, stamping, but they'd hold. He grabbed the saddlebags and brought them inside, pulling out the waterproof case with Serena's documents. We should look at these, he said. Figure out what we're actually dealing with. Mara nodded and shifted so Eli was secure in her lap while Garrick spread the papers out near the firelight.
The list was worse than he remembered.
12 families. 12 dead infants. But as he read through Serena's notes more carefully, the pattern became clearer and uglier. They were all inheritance situations, Mara said, reading over his shoulder. Look, each family had property or money tied to the child's survival. She was right. Garrick traced the connections. Ranches where the firstborn determined succession, homesteads where infant death triggered property transfers, business partnerships contingent on heirs.
Dorian positioned himself close to each family, Garrick said slowly, worked for them, managed their affairs, gained their trust. And then the babies died. Mara pulled out one of the newspaper clippings. Natural causes, they all said, fever, weakness, bad luck. But it wasn't luck. No, it was systematic. She sorted through more papers. And look at this. After each death, Dorian moved to a new position. Better job, more responsibility, more access. Garrick felt sick. He was building a resume. On dead children, Mara's voice was ice. And each time he got away with it because no one connected the incidents. Different towns, different families, different circumstances. Until Serena. Until your wife started asking why infant mortality was so high in families Dorian worked for. Mara held up a letter. She wrote to other mothers, asked questions, compared notes, and she realized the only common thread was him. Garrick read the letter. It was dated 3 weeks before Serena disappeared, addressed to a woman in a neighboring county. The handwriting was Serena's, careful, precise, determined. I know this will sound strange, but I must ask, did a man named Dorian Pike work for your family when your son passed? I'm investigating a pattern that troubles me deeply, and I believe our losses may be connected. The response was paperclipped to the letter. Yes. Mr. Pike was our ranch foreman for 8 months before and after our son's death. He was very helpful during that difficult time. Why do you ask? There were 5 more exchanges like it, 5 more families confirming Dorian's presence, 5 more pieces of a puzzle Serena had been building in secret. She knew, Garrick said. She knew, and she couldn't prove it. So she went looking for someone who'd been through this before, someone who'd know how to stop it. Me. Mara's expression was grim. She thought if she brought me back, I could spot what the doctors missed, confirm what she suspected. And she died trying. Yeah. Garrick gathered the papers back together. His hands were shaking. When we get to Grafton, when we show this to the sheriff, what happens then? If the sheriff's honest, he arrests Dorian, investigates the other deaths. Maybe some of those families get justice. Mara paused. If he's not honest, or if Dorian gets to him first, we've got a problem. How do we know which kind of sheriff we're dealing with? We don't. Not until we walk into his office and see how he reacts. That's not reassuring. No, but it's all we've got. A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses. Multiple horses. Garrick moved to the broken wall and looked out. Through the falling snow, he could see shapes approaching. 3 riders, moving fast. We've got company, he said quietly. Mara was already on her feet. Eli clutched against her chest. Dorian? Can't tell yet. Garrick grabbed his rifle from the saddle gear. But whoever it is, they're in a hurry. The riders came closer. Garrick's finger moved to the trigger. Then he recognized the lead horse. Morrison, the ranch hand he'd sent north with Dorian. Garrick stepped out of the shelter, rifle lowered, but ready. Morrison. The rider pulled up hard, his horse's hooves sliding in the snow. Mr. Hale. Thank the saints. We've been tracking you for hours. What are you doing here? Where's Dorian? Morrison dismounted quickly. He looked scared. Behind him, Blake and another hand Garrick didn't recognize sat their horses nervously. There was no fence down, sir, no cattle scattered. When we got to the northern range, everything was fine. Morrison's breath came fast. Mr. Pike realized immediately what happened, said you'd sent him away on purpose, said that woman had poisoned your mind against him. Where's he now? Heading back to Black Hollow, fast. He sent us ahead to find you. Morrison stepped closer. Mr. Hale, he's got a dozen men riding with him, armed. Said you'd kidnapped the baby, said the woman was wanted for murder and you were helping her run. Mara appeared in the shelter doorway. He's already spinning the story. It gets worse, Morrison said. He rode through Grafton on his way north, talked to the sheriff, Told him you might be coming with wild accusations. Told him you were grieving, not thinking straight. Garrick felt his stomach drop. He got to the sheriff first. Poisoned the well before we could even get there, Mara said. Smart. There's more. Morrison looked at Garrick. The doctor's dead. The world stopped. What? Dr. Vale. They found him this morning in the medicine room. Hanged himself, they're saying. Left a note confessing to malpractice. Said he'd been dosing the baby wrong. Said the guilt was too much. Garrick couldn't breathe. That's not... He was going to testify. Dorian got to him, Mara said flatly. Probably the moment we left. Made it look like suicide and remorse. The note specifically cleared Mr. Pike of any wrongdoing, Morrison continued. Said the foreman had tried to stop him, but the doctor wouldn't listen. Said Miss Quinn had been right to intervene. Perfect, Mara said. Dorian sets up Vale to take the fall, then kills him before he can tell a different story. Now, if we accuse Dorian, we look like we're attacking the man who tried to save Eli from a negligent doctor. Garrick's mind raced. Vale was supposed to be their witness, the weak link, the one who'd break and confirm everything. Now he was dead, and Dorian looked like a hero. What do we do? Morrison asked. Mr. Hale, I don't know what's true anymore, but I know Mr. Pike's got men hunting you, and I know if they find you out here alone. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Garrick looked at Mara, at the woman holding his son, at the evidence they'd gathered that suddenly seemed a lot less certain without Vale's testimony. We can't go to Grafton, he said. No. And we can't go back to Black Hollow. No. So where? Mara thought for a moment. Serena told me about a woman, Naomi Reed, lives 2 days east near Red Ravine Crossing. She said if anything went wrong, I should take the baby there. Why there? Because Naomi lost her own child to a respected doctor 5 years ago. Because she knows what it's like when no one believes you. Mara's voice hardened. And because she's one of the mothers on Serena's list, one of the families Dorian destroyed. Garrick turned to Morrison. Did Dorian say where he was headed after Black Hollow? He said he'd track you wherever you ran. Said you couldn't have gotten far with an infant. Morrison hesitated. Mr. Hale, are the accusations true? Did Mr. Pike really try to kill your son? Garrick pulled out the folder of documents, handed them to Morrison. Read these, all of them, then decide for yourself. Morrison took the folder, started reading by firelight while Blake and the other hand kept watch outside. The silence stretched. Then Morrison looked up. His face had gone pale. Sweet mercy. 8 children. Maybe more, Mara said. Those are just the ones Serena confirmed. And you're saying Mr. Pike? Morrison couldn't finish. I'm saying he's a killer who's been hiding behind respectability for years, Garrick said. And now that we know, he has to stop us before we can prove it. Morrison looked at Blake. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Morrison handed the folder back. What do you need from us? You're not coming? Can't, sir. If we disappear with you, it confirms everything Dorian's saying, but if we go back, act like we never found you. Morrison's jaw set. We can slow him down, feed him false information, make him look in the wrong places. That's dangerous. So is letting him catch you with the baby. Morrison mounted his horse. Head east to Red Ravine like the lady said. We'll tell Dorian we tracked you south toward the county line. Buy you maybe 2 days. He'll know you're lying eventually. Eventually doesn't matter if you get that evidence to someone who'll believe it. Morrison gathered his reins. There's a claims writer who works the Eastern Territory. Name's William Cross, honest man, carries legal weight. If you can find him, he might help. Where? He circuits through Red Ravine every few weeks. If luck's with you, he'll be there when you arrive. Garrick stepped forward and gripped Morrison's hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just get that baby somewhere safe. Morrison looked at Mara. Ma'am, I'm sorry I doubted you. Save the apology until we all survive this, she said. Morrison nodded and turned his horse. Blake and the other hand followed. They disappeared into the snow. Garrick and Mara stood in the cold, watching them go. 2 days east, Garrick said, through rough country, in a storm, with a baby. Yeah. Dorian will figure out Morrison lied. Yeah. We might not make it. No, we might not. Mara looked at him.
But sitting here guarantees we don't, so we ride. They packed quickly, killed the fire, secured Eli, mounted up on tired horses that deserved rest but wouldn't get it. The storm was getting worse. Snow fell thick now, cutting visibility to maybe 20 yards. The wind howled through the rocks like something alive and angry. Garrick took point. Mara followed. Between them, an infant who shouldn't be alive rode wrapped in blankets that smelled like his dead mother's last desperate hope. They rode east. Behind them, Dorian Pike gathered his men and his lies and his carefully constructed reputation, preparing to hunt down the only witnesses who could destroy everything he'd built. And somewhere ahead, in a cabin near a frozen ravine, a woman named Naomi Reed waited, though she didn't know it yet, to become the final piece in a conspiracy that had been killing children for years. The frontier wasn't kind to the weak, but it wasn't kind to the wicked either. And this storm was about to teach everyone the difference. The country got rougher as they rode. What had started as rolling terrain gave way to broken landscape, deep cuts in the earth where winter runoff had carved channels over centuries, stands of pine so thick the snow barely penetrated, rock formations that jutted up like broken teeth. This was the kind of land that didn't care about your plans. It would kill you indifferent as breathing if you made the wrong choice. Garrick's hands were numb on the reins. He'd lost feeling in his feet an hour ago. Behind him, he could hear Mara's horse laboring, struggling through drifts that came up past its knees. They'd been riding for 5 hours since leaving the shelter. The sun was setting, though you couldn't see it through the storm. Just the light changing from gray to darker gray to something approaching black. "We need to stop," Mara called. "Can't. The horses are done." Another hour. "Garrick." Her voice was sharp. "My horse just stumbled, twice. If she goes down with me carrying Eli—" He pulled up. The horses stood with their heads down, sides heaving, steam rising off their coats. Pushed too hard. He knew it. But stopping meant giving Dorian time to close the distance. "How far to Red Ravine, Chist?" Mara asked. "In this weather? Maybe another day. Day and a half if we're lucky. We won't make it without rest." She was right, but admitting it felt like surrender. "There's an old mining camp about 2 miles north," Garrick said. "Abandoned years ago. Might have shelter." 2 miles is 2 miles further from where we're headed. You got a better idea? Mara looked at the darkening sky, at the snow that showed no signs of stopping, at Eli, who'd been quiet for too long. "No," she said. "Let's go." They found the mining camp just as the last light died. It was worse than the trapper's shelter. Half the buildings had collapsed under years of snow and neglect. But one structure still stood, a long, low bunkhouse with most of its roof intact. Garrick kicked the door open. Inside smelled like rot and mice and abandonment, but it was out of the wind. They brought the horses inside. No point leaving them out to freeze. The animals moved into the space gratefully, too exhausted to care about the enclosed quarters. Mara dismounted and immediately checked Eli. The baby's face was pale, his lips faintly blue. "He's too cold," she said. Garrick was already gathering anything that would burn. Old bunks, broken furniture. He found a barrel stove in the corner, rusted but functional, and got a fire going with hands so numb he could barely strike the flint. The fire caught. Smoke filled the room before finding its way out through gaps in the roof. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Mara sat near the stove, unwrapping Eli layer by layer. The baby started crying weakly. Good. Better than silence. "Is he—" "He'll be fine. Just needs warmth and food." She started nursing him, her own hands shaking from cold. Garrick moved to the door and looked out. The storm was a solid wall of white. No way anyone was tracking them in this, which meant they were safe for now. It also meant if something went wrong, if the cold got worse, if Eli got sick, if Dorian somehow found them, there was nowhere to run. He closed the door and wedged a broken board against it. Not much of a lock, but it would make noise if anyone tried to enter. "We should take turns sleeping," Mara said. "One of us stays awake, keeps the fire going. I'll take first watch." "You've been awake longer than I have." "I'm not sleeping until I know we're secure." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Wake me in 3 hours." She settled against the wall near the stove, Eli cradled against her chest. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, the kind of sleep that came from pure exhaustion.
Garrick fed the fire and listened to the storm. He thought about Serena, about her riding through weather like this to find Mara, about her dying alone on a frozen trail because she'd chosen to save their son instead of herself. He thought about the 8 families on that list, the parents who'd buried their children and never knew the truth. The graves scattered across the territory, each one marking a life Dorian had stolen. He thought about what would happen if they didn't make it to Red Ravine, if Dorian caught them, if no one ever knew the truth. The anger that had been building since Mara walked into his house crystallized into something colder and harder. Dorian Pike wasn't just going to face justice. He was going to face Garrick. And when that moment came, there wouldn't be any law or procedure or civilized restraint. There would just be a father and the man who tried to murder his son. That was enough. 3 hours later, he woke Mara. She took over the watch without complaint. Garrick lay down on the hard floor and closed his eyes, expecting to be too wired to sleep. He was unconscious in seconds. He woke to voices. For a confused moment, he thought he was back at Black Hollow, in his own bed, with Serena shaking him awake because Eli was crying. Then reality crashed back. He sat up fast. The fire had burned down to coals. Gray light leaked through gaps in the walls. Morning. Mara was at the door looking out through a crack. Eli was awake in her arms, making small sounds. "What is it?" Garrick asked quietly. "Riders, 3 of them. Maybe 400 yards out." Garrick moved to the door. Through the gap he could see shapes moving through the thinning storm. Horses. Men. Too far to identify. "Dorians?" he asked. "Can't tell, but they're tracking, following our trail." Morrison said he'd send Dorian south. Maybe he didn't believe it. Or maybe these aren't Dorian's men. She looked at him. Either way, they're between us and Red Ravine. Garrick's mind raced. They couldn't outrun riders on rested horses, not with their own mounts exhausted and a baby to carry. And fighting was suicide. He had a rifle and a pistol. If the riders were armed and hostile, they'd cut him down before he got off 3 shots. "We need to hide," he said. "Where?" He looked around the bunkhouse. There was nothing. No second room, no cellar, just open space and collapsed bunks. Then he saw it. A pile of old canvas in the corner. Mine tarps, probably. Rotted and torn, but still substantial. "There," he said. They moved fast, covered the horses with what tack they could remove, hid the saddlebags behind broken furniture. Then they crawled under the canvas pile and pulled it over themselves. It smelled like decay and dust. Eli started to fuss. "Quiet," Mara whispered. She pressed the baby against her chest, rocking gently. "Quiet, quiet, quiet." The voices outside got louder. Garrick could hear them now through the walls. "Tracks lead here. Buildings abandoned. Check it anyway." Footsteps crunched in the snow, moving closer. The door banged open. Garrick held his breath. Through a small gap in the canvas, he could see boots. 2 pairs. Heavy, men's. "Nothing here," one voice said. "Just old junk?" "Check the corners." Footsteps moved through the space, coming closer to their hiding spot. Eli made a small sound. Mara's hand clamped over the baby's mouth, gentle but firm. Garrick could see her face in the dim light under the canvas, eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been prayer or might have been just desperate concentration. The footsteps stopped 3 feet from the canvas pile. "Just trash," the voice said. "Nobody's been here in years." "You sure?" "Look at this place. Roof's half gone. Floors rotted through. If someone spent the night here, they're stupider than we thought." A pause. Then, "All right, let's keep moving. They've got to be somewhere ahead." The footsteps retreated. The door banged shut again. Garrick waited, counting heartbeats. 1 minute, 2, 5. Finally, he lifted the edge of the canvas and looked out. Empty. He crawled out, helped Mara up. Eli was red-faced, gasping for air. Mara removed her hand and the baby sucked in a huge breath and started crying. "Let him," Garrick said. "They're gone." He moved to the door and looked out. The riders were visible in the distance, heading east. Following the trail Morrison must have laid. "They're tracking us the wrong direction," Mara said. "But how long before they realize and turn back?" "Not long." Garrick grabbed the saddlebags. "We need to move. Now." They packed in silence, working with the speed of people who knew every second counted. The horses were rested enough to move, though not to run. That would have to be enough. They rode out of the mining camp and turned northeast, away from the trail the riders were following. The detour cost them time, but it bought them distance, and distance, right now, was the only thing keeping them alive. By midday, the storm had passed. The sky cleared to hard blue, and the sun came out bright and merciless. The temperature didn't rise. If anything, it dropped as the clouds moved away. But the visibility improved. They could see for miles now, which meant anyone looking could see them too. Garrick kept them to low ground, followed creek beds and draws, avoided ridge lines where they'd be silhouetted against the sky. How much further? Mara asked. 6 hours, maybe 8. Will we make it before dark? If the horses hold. They rode in silence for another hour. Then Mara said, "Tell me about Naomi Reed. Don't know much? Serena corresponded with her, but they never met face to face. Lost her son 5 years ago. Husband left her after. She's been living alone at Red Ravine ever since." "Why there?" "It's end of the world country. Nobody goes there unless they're running from something or hiding from someone." "So she'll understand why we're coming." "Maybe, or she'll shoot us for bringing trouble to her door." "Optimistic." "I'm done being optimistic." Mara laughed. It was a tired sound. "Yeah, I noticed." They crossed a frozen creek bed around 3 in the afternoon. The horses picked their way carefully over ice-slick rocks, while Eli slept against Mara's chest, wrapped so tight only his face showed. "He looks like her," Mara said suddenly. Garrick looked back. "What?" "Eli. He looks like Serena. Same eyes, same shape to his face." Garrick hadn't let himself think about that, about the ways his son would carry his mother forward. It hurt too much. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He does. She talked about you constantly, those 2 days we rode together, what you'd say, how you'd react, whether you'd believe her." Mara shifted Eli carefully. "She was terrified you'd think she was crazy." "Did, at first. But you came around, because she was right." "No, because you loved her enough to question people you trusted." Mara's voice was matter-of-fact. "Most men wouldn't do that. Most men would rather believe their friends than their wives." Garrick didn't know what to say to that. They rode on. The sun started dropping toward the horizon, painting the snow orange and gold. Beautiful. The kind of frontier sunset that made people write poems about the untamed West. Garrick had never hated beauty more, because beautiful meant clear, and clear meant visible, and visible meant Dorian's men could spot them from miles away if they were looking in the right direction. "There," Mara said. Garrick followed her gaze. In the distance, where the land dropped away into a deep ravine, he could see a thin line of smoke rising. "That's it," he said. "Red Ravine Crossing." "You're sure?" "Nothing else out here has to be." They pushed the horses harder. Not quite a run, but faster than the careful pace they'd been maintaining. The animals responded, sensing destination. The smoke got closer. The ravine came into view, a massive scar in the earth where ancient water had cut through rock, leaving sheer walls that dropped 100 feet to a frozen river below. A single rope bridge spanned the gap, swaying in the wind. And on the far side, tucked against the ravine wall, sat a small cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. Naomi Reed's place. They reached the bridge just as the sun touched the horizon. Garrick dismounted and walked to the edge. The bridge looked old, rope frayed in places, wooden planks weathered gray. It was wide enough for a horse, but barely. "We're crossing that?" Mara asked. "Unless you want to ride 10 miles north to the next crossing. In the dark." In the dark. She looked at the bridge, at the drop, at the baby sleeping against her chest. "One at a time," she said. "Test it first." Garrick led his horse onto the bridge. The whole structure swayed under their weight. He could feel the rope flexing, the planks creaking. Below, the frozen river waited like a mouth. He walked slowly, one step at a time. The horse followed, nervous but trusting. Halfway across, a plank cracked under his boot. He froze. The plank held. Barely. He stepped carefully over it and kept moving. When he reached the far side, he turned and waved to Mara. She started across with her horse, moving even slower. Garrick watched every step, his heart hammering. She made it. They stood on the far side of Red Ravine, looking at the cabin 30 yards away. Light showed in the windows. The door was closed. No movement visible. "Stay here," Garrick said. "Let me go first." "If she shoots you, then what?" "Then you ride back across and figure something else out." Before Mara could argue, he walked toward the cabin. He got halfway there before the door opened. A woman stepped out with a rifle leveled at his chest. She was maybe 40, maybe older, hard to tell with frontier women. Hair pulled back severe, face carved lean by hard living, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. "Stop right there," she said. Garrick stopped. "Turn around and leave." "Are you Naomi Reed?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Garrick Hale. I'm from Black Hollow Ranch, 2 days west. My wife Serena sent someone to find you." The rifle didn't waver. "Serena Hale's dead. Word came through last week." "I know, she died trying to save my son." Garrick gestured toward Mara. "That woman there was the last person to see her alive. Serena told her to bring the baby here if things went wrong." Naomi's eyes flicked to Mara, to the bundle strapped against her chest. "Why?" "Because the man who killed your son is trying to kill mine, and Serena thought you'd help us stop him." The rifle finally lowered an inch. "What man?" "Dorian Pike." Naomi went very still. The rifle came back up, but now it was shaking. "You're lying." "I have proof, documents, a list of families, 8 dead children. Your son is on that list." "That's not possible. My boy died of fever," the doctor said. "The doctor was wrong, or lying, or working with Dorian." Garrick took a step closer. "Please, we've been riding for 2 days. We're being hunted. My son is 7 months old and he's going to die if we don't stop the man responsible." Naomi stared at him, at Mara, at the baby. Then she lowered the rifle. "Get inside," she said, "before someone sees you." They moved quickly into the cabin. Naomi slammed the door behind them and threw the bolt. The interior was small, warm, sparse. A fireplace, a table, a single cot. Everything worn but clean. Mara unwrapped Eli. The baby woke up and immediately started crying, hungry, cold, scared. Naomi stood with her back against the door, rifle still in hand, watching Mara tend to the crying baby with an expression Garrick couldn't read. "How old?" she asked. 7 months, Garrick said. "My son was 6 months when he died." Her voice was flat. "They told me it was natural, that babies that young just sometimes stop breathing, that there was nothing anyone could have done." "They lied." Naomi's jaw tightened. "Show me the proof." Garrick pulled out the waterproof case and spread the documents across her small table. The list, the letters, the newspaper clippings. Serena's careful handwriting connecting dots across 5 years and 8 dead children. Naomi read in silence. Her face didn't change, but her hand started shaking. "Daniel," she whispered, touching one of the names. "My son, Daniel Reed." "I'm sorry," Garrick said. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't apologize. Just tell me everything." So he did, starting with Eli getting sick, with Dr. Vale's treatments that made things worse, with Mara appearing from the storm carrying Serena's ring and a warning, with the discovery of Dorian's manipulation and Vale's cowardice, with Morrison's message about the doctor's convenient suicide and Dorian's manhunt. Naomi listened without interrupting. When he finished, she set the rifle down carefully on the table. "Dorian Pike worked for us," she said quietly. "Came recommended by another ranch family. Said he was looking for steady work. My husband hired him as foreman." She touched the list again. "Daniel got sick 3 weeks later. Fever that wouldn't break. The doctor tried everything, bloodletting, purgatives, kept saying the baby just wasn't strong enough." "And Dorian?" Mara asked, still holding Eli. "He was helpful, supportive. Took over the ranch work so my husband and I could focus on Daniel. Made sure the household ran smooth during the crisis." Naomi's voice was bitter. "After Daniel died, Dorian helped arrange the burial, managed the legal paperwork, even loaned us money when the medical bills came due." "Let me guess," Mara said. "The loan had terms, property deed as collateral. When we couldn't pay, my husband was drinking heavy by then, couldn't work. Dorian offered to buy us out, said it was the kindest solution, that we could start fresh somewhere else." Naomi looked at them. "We sold, for half what the place was worth. And Dorian turned around and sold it 6 months later to a mining company for 3 times what he paid us. Garrick felt sick. He profited from your son's death. He profited from our grief, from our exhaustion, from the fact that neither of us could think straight. Naomi picked up one of the newspaper clippings. My husband left a year later, couldn't stand being around me, couldn't stand the memories. I came here because it was cheap and far away from everything. And Dorian, Garrick asked, moved on to another ranch, another family. She looked at the list. Another baby. The cabin fell silent, except for Eli's fussing. Mara was trying to soothe him, but the baby was hungry and cold, and past the point where comfort helped. He needs milk, Mara said. Real milk, not just nursing. He's too weak. I've got goat's milk, Naomi said. It's not much, but it'll help. She moved to a small ice box in the corner and pulled out a bottle, poured some into a tin cup and warmed it over the fire. Handed it to Mara. Mara dipped her finger in the milk and let Eli suck it off. The baby latched on desperately, making small sounds of relief. Garrick watched his son drink and felt something in his chest unclench slightly. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. How far behind is Dorian? Naomi asked. Hard to say. Morrison sent him south initially, but he'll figure it out. Could be a day. Could be hours. Garrick moved to the window and looked out at the gathering darkness. We need to get this evidence to someone with authority, someone who can investigate properly. The sheriff won't help, Naomi said. Dorian got to him first. Morrison mentioned a claims writer, William Cross, said he circuits through this area. Naomi's expression shifted. Cross was here 3 days ago. He's good. Honest. But he's headed north now. Won't be back this way for 2 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. No, you don't. Naomi pulled the rifle off the table and checked the load, which means we need a different plan. We? Mara looked up from feeding Eli. You think I'm going to let the man who killed my son walk away again? Naomi's voice was steel. I've spent 5 years believing I did something wrong, that I wasn't a good enough mother, that if I'd just tried harder, prayed more, been better somehow, Daniel would have lived. She looked at the documents. Now I know the truth. And I'm done hiding. Garrick studied her, the lean face, the hard eyes, the way she held the rifle like she knew how to use it. What are you suggesting? He asked. That we stop running, stop waiting for someone else to save us. Naomi moved to a chest in the corner and pulled out a box of ammunition. We have the evidence, we have the truth, and we have something Dorian doesn't. What's that? We know he's coming. She started loading shells into her pockets. This cabin sits on the only easy crossing for 20 miles. If Dorian's tracking you, he has to come through here, which means we can be ready. Mara shifted Eli to her shoulder. You're talking about an ambush. I'm talking about a confrontation, on our terms, where we have the advantage. He'll have men with him, Garrick said. Armed men. We're 3 people, one of whom is holding a baby. Then we make it 4. Naomi walked to the door and opened it, called out into the darkness. Samuel, get in here. A figure emerged from the shadows near the ravine. A young man, maybe 20, with a rifle slung over his shoulder. He walked into the cabin with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. This is Samuel Tucker, Naomi said. Trapper, hunter, the only other soul living within 10 miles of this place. Samuel nodded to them. Ma'am, sir, heard you had visitors. You've been watching the cabin? Garrick asked. Someone has to. Miss Naomi's alone out here. I keep an eye out. Samuel's gaze moved to Mara and the baby. Heard about the trouble you're running from. Dorian Pike. You know him? Know of him. He came through here 5 years back, right after Daniel died. Tried to buy Miss Naomi's land cheap. I was just a kid then, but I remember. Samuel's expression hardened. Man gave me a bad feeling, the kind that sticks. Samuel's a good shot, Naomi said. Better than me. And he knows this ravine better than anyone. The trails, the crossings, the approaches. So we have 4 people and a geographical advantage, Mara said. Against how many of Dorian's men? Morrison said 12, Garrick answered. 12-4. Great odds. Better than running forever. Naomi closed the door. Besides, they won't all make it across the bridge. Not if we control the crossing. Garrick looked at the window, at the darkness beyond, at the rope bridge barely visible in the moonlight. An idea started forming, The bridge, he said slowly. If we cut it after Dorian crosses, we trap him on this side, Naomi finished. Separate him from his men. Or we cut it before he crosses and stop him completely, Samuel said. No. Mara's voice was sharp. We need Dorian alive. We need him to confess. If we just kill him, his reputation survives. The families on that list never get justice. It becomes our word against a dead man's legacy. She was right. Garrick hated it, but she was right. So we let him cross, he said. Separate him from most of his men. Force a confrontation where he has to explain himself. In front of witnesses, Naomi added, if William Cross won't come to us, we bring the evidence to the next best thing. What's that? The telegraph station at Copper Ridge, 20 miles east. If we can get a message out to the territorial marshal, to the newspaper in the capital, to anyone who will listen, we make this public, make it impossible to bury. Garrick thought it through. The plan had holes, a dozen places it could go wrong, but it was better than anything else they had. All right, he said, we set up here. Wait for Dorian. Separate him from his men. Force a confession, or at least a confrontation witnessed by enough people that the truth can't be hidden. And if he doesn't confess, Samuel asked, then we make sure the evidence survives even if we don't. Garrick looked at Mara. You take Eli and these documents. If things go bad, you run. Get to Copper Ridge. Send the telegrams. Tell the story. I'm not running, Mara said. You're the only one who can prove Serena was right. Who can connect all of this? Without you, it's just a dead doctor, a desperate father, and accusations. He's right, Naomi said quietly. Someone has to survive this to speak for the children who didn't. Mara looked down at Eli. The baby had finished the milk and was sleeping again, his face peaceful in a way that seemed impossible given everything happening around him. Fine, she said, but I'm not leaving until I absolutely have to. They spent the next hour preparing. Samuel reinforced the cabin door and shuttered the windows, leaving small gaps to shoot through. Naomi distributed weapons, 2 rifles, 3 pistols, ammunition. Garrick checked the bridge, testing its weight capacity, looking for the best place to cut it if needed. The rope was old but thick. It would take time to saw through, time they might not have if things went wrong. How will we know when they're coming? Mara asked. Samuel pointed to a series of bells strung along the trail approaches. Tripwires. Anyone coming in from the west hits those, we'll hear it a mile out. And from the south? I'll be watching from the ridge. Got a clear view. See them coming long before they see me. Samuel checked his rifle. How many you think will actually cross the bridge? Dorian will, Garrick said. He's not the kind to send men into danger he won't face himself. Makes him look weak, so he'll cross with a few others. Leave the rest on the far side as backup. How do you know? Because that's what I'd do, and Dorian thinks like a rancher, like someone managing risk and resources. He thinks like a killer, Naomi said. Don't forget that. No one responded, because she was right. They'd all been trying to understand Dorian as a businessman, a foreman, a respected professional, but at his core, he was something simpler and more brutal. He was a man who killed children for profit and slept fine afterward. That kind of man didn't follow normal logic. Midnight came and went. They took turns sleeping, 2 hours each while the others kept watch. Eli woke twice, crying, and Mara fed him with the goat's milk mixed with water. The baby was getting stronger, color returning to his face, breathing easier, small mercies. Dawn broke gray and cold. Samuel came down from his ridge position just after sunrise. Riders, 8 of them, maybe 2 hours out. 8, Garrick frowned. Morrison said a dozen. Maybe he split his forces, or maybe some turned back. Samuel moved to the window. Either way, they're coming straight for the bridge. Is Dorian with them? Can't tell from this distance, but the lead rider matches his build. Garrick looked at Naomi. You ready for this? She loaded her rifle without answering. The question didn't need words. Mara bundled Eli up and packed the documents into the saddlebags. Where do you want me? Back room, out of sight. If shooting starts, you stay down. Garrick handed her his pistol. If someone gets through that isn't us, you use this. She took it. I know how to shoot. I figured. They positioned themselves. Garrick at the front window with a clear view of the bridge. Naomi at the side window covering the approach from the north. Samuel on the roof with his rifle, hidden behind the chimney. And they waited.
The minutes stretched. Garrick's hands were sweating despite the cold. He wiped them on his pants and gripped the rifle tighter. "Movement," Samuel called down quietly. "They're at the bridge." Garrick shifted position to see. 8 riders had stopped at the far side of the ravine. They were talking, gesturing at the bridge. One of them dismounted. Dorian. Even from this distance, Garrick recognized him, the way he moved, the authoritative gestures, the way the other men deferred to him. Dorian walked onto the bridge, alone, testing it. The whole structure swayed under his weight. He made it halfway across, then stopped, looked directly at the cabin. "He knows we're here," Naomi said. "Of course he knows." Garrick's finger moved to the trigger. Question is whether he cares. Dorian stood on the bridge for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his men. They had a brief conversation. 3 men dismounted. The other 4 stayed with the horses. Dorian and the 3 men started across the bridge, walking slow, careful, hands near their weapons but not drawing. "Let them come," Garrick said quietly. "Wait until they're all across." The 4 men reached the midpoint of the bridge. The structure groaned and swayed. One of them grabbed the rope railing to steady himself. They kept coming. When they were 3/4 across, Garrick stepped out of the cabin. The men on the bridge froze. "That's far enough," Garrick called. Dorian raised his hand slowly, peaceable, reasonable. "Garrick, thank the saints. We've been tracking you for 2 days. Are you all right? Is Eli safe?" The concern in his voice was perfect. If Garrick hadn't known better, he would have believed it. "Get off the bridge," Garrick said. Slowly. Of course. Of course." Dorian gestured to his men, and they all moved forward again, completing the crossing. They stopped about 20 feet from the cabin. "Garrick, I understand you're confused, upset. That woman has filled your head with lies. Her name is Mara, and she told me the truth. She told you what she believes is the truth. But she's wrong, dangerously wrong." Dorian's expression shifted to sympathy. "Dr. Vale confessed, Garrick, before he died. He admitted he'd been treating Eli incorrectly, that his pride and his debts clouded his judgment. But he was clear that I tried to stop him, that I urged him to get a second opinion. Convenient that he confessed right before hanging himself. Guilt does terrible things to men. So does murder." Dorian's expression flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipping. "I don't know what she's told you, but she didn't tell me anything I didn't find on my own." Garrick pulled the folded list from his pocket, held it up. 12 families, 8 dead children, your name on every single case. The men with Dorian shifted nervously, looking at each other, at their boss. Dorian's face hardened. "That's absurd. I've worked for many families over the years. It's not my fault some of them suffered tragedies." 8 tragedies. All children under 1 year old, all dying under similar circumstances, all while you were positioned to benefit from their deaths. Garrick's voice was steel. "That's not coincidence, that's a pattern. You're grieving, not thinking clearly." Dorian took a step forward. "Let me help you. Let me take you and Eli home. We'll sort this out properly. Get you rest. Medical attention? Stay where you are." Dorian stopped. His hands were still raised, but something in his posture had changed, the reasonable man giving way to something colder. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The only mistake I made was trusting you. You trusted me for 6 years. 6 good years where I built your ranch into something profitable, something stable." Dorian's voice took on an edge. "Everything you have, I helped create. And this is how you repay that loyalty? You tried to kill my son. I tried to save your ranch from a man too weak to make hard decisions." The admission hung in the air like smoke. One of Dorian's men took a step back. "Boss, what are you Shut up." Dorian didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on Garrick. "You want the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. Eli was weak, sickly, the kind of child who drags a family down, costs money, requires constant attention, and you were so distracted by Serena's disappearance, by your grief, that you couldn't see what needed to be done." "What needed to be done?" Garrick repeated. His voice was shaking now. "You mean murdering my child? I mean letting nature take its course with a little help. No pain, no suffering.
Just a quiet transition that would have freed you to rebuild, to move forward. Dorian's expression was almost pitying. I've done it before for other families. They thanked me afterward, eventually. They didn't know, because they didn't need to know. The result was the same: dead weight removed, resources freed up, futures secured. Dorian lowered his hands. You think you're different, special? You're just another rancher trying to build a legacy in country that doesn't care about your feelings. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary. Garrick heard movement behind him. Naomi stepping out of the cabin, rifle raised. You killed my son, she said. Dorian looked at her. Recognition dawned slowly. Naomi Reed, I heard you'd moved out here. Tragic what happened to your family. You made it happen. I helped you move on. Your husband was useless. The baby was doomed anyway. I just accelerated the inevitable and made sure you got something out of it. Money from our land. Fair payment for services rendered. Dorian's voice was matter of fact. You would have lost everything anyway. At least my way gave you options. My son wasn't sick, Naomi said. Her voice cracked. He was fine, healthy, and you killed him for property. I provided opportunity. What you did with it was your choice. Samuel appeared on the roof, rifle aimed down at Dorian's men. Drop your weapons, now. The three men with Dorian looked at each other. One of them started to comply. Dorian's hand moved to his gun. Everything happened at once. Garrick fired, missed. The bullet kicked up dirt near Dorian's feet. One of Dorian's men drew and shot at Samuel. The bullet hit the roof, spraying splinters. Naomi fired, hit one of the men in the shoulder. He went down screaming. The other two men scattered, running for cover behind rocks near the ravine. Dorian drew his pistol and fired 3 shots toward the cabin. Glass shattered, wood splintered. Garrick dove behind a water trough and returned fire. The man Naomi had shot was crawling toward the bridge, leaving a blood trail. Samuel shot him again. This time he stopped moving. Across the ravine, the 4 men who'd stayed behind were shouting, trying to figure out what to do. The bridge swayed empty between them. Dorian was behind a boulder now, reloading. You can't win this, Garrick. Even if you kill me, my men will hunt you down. Your men just watched you confess to murdering children, Garrick shouted back. You think they're going to protect you after that? One of the remaining men stood up, hands raised. I'm out. I didn't sign up for this. Coward, Dorian fired at him. The bullet hit the man in the leg. He collapsed, cursing. The last man standing threw down his gun and ran for the bridge. Samuel let him go. Now it was just Dorian. Garrick reloaded and tried to get a clear shot, but Dorian was well covered, and he was smart enough to know that as long as he kept them pinned, eventually reinforcements might arrive. Mara, Garrick called. Are you safe? We're fine. Her voice came from inside the cabin. Eli's fine. Get to the horses. Prepare to run if this goes wrong. Garrick, do it! He heard her moving inside. Dorian laughed. It was an ugly sound. You're going to send her away? The woman carrying all your evidence? That's your plan. Better than letting you destroy it. You think anyone will believe her, a drifter with a criminal past accusing a respected foreman? Dorian fired twice more. I'll bury her story the same way I buried the others. Not if you're dead. Then we'll both be dead, and Eli will still die. Maybe not today, maybe not this month, but eventually, because without me, you'll fail. You'll lose the ranch, and that sickly child won't survive poverty. The words hit harder than bullets, because part of Garrick wondered if Dorian was right, if he was strong enough to protect his son alone, if he could build a future without the man who'd been managing his success for 6 years. Then he thought about Serena, dying in the snow trying to save their child, and he knew the answer. Samuel, he called. Can you hit him from there? Not without exposing myself. He's got the angle. Naomi? Same problem. He picked good cover. They were at a stalemate. Dorian knew it too. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to let me walk away. I'll take my men and leave. You'll never see me again. And my son lives, dies. I don't care anymore. This territory is finished for me anyway. Dorian's voice was calm now, rational. You want justice? Fine. You've got your evidence. Take it to the marshal, the newspapers. See how far it gets you without witnesses, without the doctor, without anything but paper and accusations. We've got your confession. Everyone here heard it. 3 people, one of whom is a wanted criminal, one who's a bereaved mother with obvious bias, and you, a grieving father who might have imagined anything." Dorian laughed again. "Good luck with that." Garrick's mind raced. Dorian was right about the evidence problem. Without veil, without more witnesses, it was their word against his reputation, unless they could force something better. "What about the men across the ravine?" Garrick called. "They heard you too." They heard a negotiation under duress, a man saying whatever he had to say to save his life. Dorian's voice was confident again. "They're loyal. They'll back my version." "Even after you shot one of them?" "Accidents happen in gunfights." Garrick looked at Naomi, at Samuel on the roof, at the cabin where Mara and Eli waited. They needed a new plan, and they needed it fast, because the sun was climbing, and eventually Dorian's patience would run out. And when it did, this would end in blood. The standoff stretched into its second hour. Garrick's arms ached from holding the rifle. His throat was dry. The sun had climbed high enough to burn off the morning cold, and sweat ran down his back despite the temperature. Dorian hadn't moved from behind his boulder. Neither had Garrick from behind the water trough. 2 men locked in a stalemate that couldn't last forever. Something had to break. It was Mara who broke it. She came out of the cabin carrying Eli, walking straight into the open ground between Garrick and Dorian's position. "What are you doing?" Garrick shouted. "Get back inside." She ignored him, kept walking until she stood in clear view of everyone. Garrick, Dorian, the men across the ravine, Samuel on the roof. "Enough," she said. Her voice carried across the frozen ground. "We're done with this." Dorian shifted position slightly. "Smart woman. Tell your employer to let me walk away." "I'm not talking to Garrick." Mara looked directly at the boulder hiding Dorian. "I'm talking to you." "I've got nothing to say to you." "Then listen." She adjusted Eli against her chest. The baby was awake, watching everything with wide eyes. "You want to walk away? Fine. But first you're going to hear what I have to say, what Serena Hale would say if she was still alive. Serena was a foolish woman who died because she couldn't mind her own business. Serena was a mother who saw what you were and tried to stop you." Mara's voice was steel. "She spent weeks investigating you, riding through winter to find me, and her last words before she died were about saving her son from a man who killed children for money." Lies. The truth, and you know it. Mara took a step closer to Dorian's position. "I've spent 10 years running from what happened to that first baby I tried to save. 10 years believing I failed because I wasn't smart enough, strong enough, respected enough. But I didn't fail because of me. I failed because men like you make sure the truth never matters as much as reputation. You failed because you were incompetent. I failed because the doctor was a coward, and you were a killer, and the family wanted someone to blame who wasn't powerful enough to fight back." Mara's voice cracked. "But I'm done running, done being quiet, done letting men like you win because good people are too afraid to speak." Garrick watched her standing in the open, completely exposed, holding his son like a shield made of defiance and truth. "Get down," he said quietly. "Please." She didn't move. Across the ravine, the men were watching, listening. One of them had pulled out a notebook, writing something down. Dorian saw it too. "Put that away." The man didn't. "I said put it away." "I'm just making notes, boss, in case there's an inquiry." "There won't be an inquiry." "You just confessed to killing children," the man said. His voice was shaking but determined. "I'm writing it down, all of it." Another man spoke up. "Me too. I got family, kids of my own. If what she's saying is true, it's not true." Dorian's control was slipping. "These people are liars trying to destroy me." "Then why'd you shoot Marcus?" The man gestured to the body near the bridge. "He was just trying to walk away." "He was a coward." "He was smart enough to see what you are." The group across the ravine was fracturing. Garrick could see it happening. The loyal men becoming uncertain men. The uncertain men becoming witnesses. Dorian saw it too. He stood up from behind the boulder, gun raised, pointing at Mara. "Drop your weapons," he said. "All of you. Or I shoot her and the baby." Garrick's blood froze. Samuel's voice came from the roof. "You pull that trigger, you're dead before she hits the ground." "Maybe. But she'll still be dead. And so will the child." Dorian's hand was steady. Is that what you want, Garrick? Your son dead because you couldn't let this go? Garrick stood slowly, rifle still aimed at Dorian. Shoot her and every man here becomes a witness to murder. Not manipulation, not conspiracy. Just straight murder of a woman holding an infant. Your reputation dies with her. My reputation is already dead thanks to you people. Dorian's voice was bitter. So what do I have to lose? Your life, Naomi said. She'd moved to a different position, flanking Dorian from the side. You shoot her, we shoot you. Simple as that. 3 deaths instead of however many you've already caused, Samuel added. Seems like bad math. Dorian's jaw clenched. The gun didn't waver, but Garrick could see the calculation happening. The professional killer weighing odds and outcomes. Mara spoke quietly. You're not going to shoot me. You sound very certain. Because you need me alive to trade for your freedom. Dead. I'm just evidence. Alive. I'm leverage. She shifted Eli slightly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to lower that gun. We're all going to sit down and wait for proper authorities to arrive. And you're going to hope that telling the truth now counts for something later. Why would I do that? Because it's the only move you have left that doesn't end with you dead or running for the rest of your life. Mara's eyes were hard. You're smart enough to know when a game is over. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then a new voice cut through it. I'd listen to her if I were you. Everyone turned. A man on horseback was approaching from the east. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and a weathered face. He wore a badge on his chest, Territorial Claims Rider. William Cross. He rode up to the cabin and dismounted slowly, taking in the scene with the calm assessment of someone who'd walked into worse. Heard gunshots from 5 miles out, Cross said. Thought I'd investigate. His eyes moved from Dorian to Mara to Garrick. Somebody want to explain what's happening here? Garrick found his voice first. William Cross? That's right. Dorian Pike has been murdering infants across the territory for 5 years. We have evidence, witnesses, and his confession. Cross looked at Dorian. That true? These people are delusional. I heard your voice carrying across the ravine when I rode up. Something about letting nature take its course with a little help. That sound delusional to anyone else? The men across the ravine shook their heads. One of them held up his notebook. I got it all written down, sir. Everything he said. Cross nodded slowly. Mr. Pike, I'm going to need you to lower that weapon. I'm not submitting to arrest based on hearsay and hysteria. I'm not arresting you, yet. I'm telling you to lower your weapon before the situation gets worse. Cross's voice was calm, but carried authority. You point a gun at a woman holding a baby in front of a territorial officer. That becomes a whole different kind of problem. Dorian's hand shook slightly. The gun was still aimed at Mara. Don't make me draw on you, Cross said. I'm old and my hands aren't steady. Might hit the woman by accident. The threat was gentle, but real. Dorian lowered the gun. Cross moved forward quickly and took it from him. Then he looked at Garrick. You said you have evidence? Garrick retrieved the waterproof case from the cabin, spread the documents out on a flat rock where Cross could see them. The claims writer read in silence. His expression didn't change, but his jaw got tighter with each page. 12 families, he said finally. 8 confirmed deaths, dates, locations, circumstances. He looked at Dorian. You worked for all these families? I worked for many families over the years. That proves nothing. It proves a pattern. Cross held up one of the letters. And these correspondences suggest Mrs. Serena Hale was investigating that pattern when she died. Conveniently died, some might say. Serena Hale froze to death in a blizzard. Natural causes. After riding through a blizzard to find the one person who could confirm her suspicions about you. Cross gestured to Mara. This woman, who you just threatened to shoot. Dorian said nothing. Cross looked at the men across the ravine. Any of you willing to testify about what you heard here today? 3 hands went up. Mr. Pike confessing to mercy killings of weak children? All 3 nodded. Him shooting one of his own men who tried to walk away? More nods. Cross turned back to Dorian. Sir, I'm placing you under territorial custody pending a formal investigation into multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and fraud. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent. I'd suggest using it. Cross pulled out a set of iron restraints. Hands out. Dorian didn't move. Samuel's rifle clicked from the roof. Do what the man says. Slowly, Dorian extended his hands. Cross secured the restraints with practiced efficiency. Anyone else involved in this I should know about? Dr. Mercer Vale, Garrick said. He's dead now, supposedly suicide. But he was complicit in at least one of the cases, maybe more. I'll need a full statement from all of you, written and sworn. Cross looked at Mara. Including you, ma'am, since you were apparently Mrs. Hale's last contact. Mara nodded. She was still holding Eli, who'd started to fuss. Can we do it somewhere warm? This baby needs proper shelter. My camp is 3 miles east. We'll go there. Cross gestured to the men across the ravine. One of you ride to Copper Ridge. Telegraph the territorial marshal. Tell him we've got a major case developing and I need support. One of the men mounted up and took off at a gallop. Cross looked at Samuel. You know this area. Any secure place we can hold Mr. Pike while we sort this out? Root cellar under Miss Naomi's cabin. Stone walls. Single entrance. He won't get out. Good enough for now? Cross started walking Dorian toward the cabin. Let's get everyone inside and begin taking statements. The next hours passed in a blur of questions and writing. Cross was thorough. He wanted every detail, dates, times, names, exact words spoken. He cross-referenced the documents Serena had compiled with what Garrick, Mara, and Naomi told him. The men from across the ravine gave their statements separately. Their accounts matched. Dorian had confessed, had shot his own man, had threatened a woman holding an infant. By sunset, Cross had enough to hold Dorian indefinitely. This goes to trial, he said, organizing the papers into files. It's going to be ugly. Families will have to be notified. Bodies might need to be exhumed. The territory hasn't seen a case like this in 20 years. Will it stick? Garrick asked. Or will his reputation shield him? His reputation's finished. Too many witnesses. Too much documentation. Cross looked at Mara. And you. Your testimony ties everything together. Without you, this is all circumstantial. I'm not going anywhere, Mara said. Good. Because you're probably going to testify multiple times. County trial, territorial hearing, maybe federal if we find evidence of crimes across territorial lines. I'll do whatever's needed. Cross nodded. Then he looked at Garrick. Your wife was a remarkable woman. Most people see patterns and ignore them. She saw them and acted. That took courage. Garrick felt something break inside his chest. He'd been holding himself together through everything, the confrontation, the standoff, the statements. But hearing someone acknowledge what Serena had done, what she'd sacrificed, finally cracked the wall. She died trying to save our son, he said quietly. I never even got to say goodbye. But her last act mattered. That counts for something. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. Garrick was too tired to figure out which. Eli started crying. Mara handed him to Garrick. He needs his father. Garrick took his son and held him close. The baby felt warm and alive and real. Everything else, the evidence, the trial, the justice, was abstraction. But this small life in his arms was concrete, worth fighting for, worth finishing what Serena started. 3 days later, they buried Dorian Pike's reputation in court documents and witness testimony. Cross had worked fast. The territorial marshal arrived with 2 deputies. They'd exhumed one of the bodies from Naomi's son's grave and found evidence of poisoning, mercury compounds that matched medicines Dr. Vale had prescribed. 2 other families came forward. Their children had died under similar circumstances with Dorian nearby and helpful afterward. The case built itself. Dorian never spoke again after his arrest, refused to testify, refused to explain, just sat in his cell with the same calm expression he'd worn while working as a respected foreman. Some men confess when cornered. Others just go quiet and let the evidence speak. Dorian was the latter. The trial would take months to prepare, but Cross assured them the outcome wasn't in doubt. Garrick didn't care about the timeline anymore. He cared about getting Eli home. They left Red Ravine on the 4th day. Mara, Garrick, and Eli. Naomi stayed behind, said she'd testify when called, but needed time to process what justice for Daniel actually looked like after 5 years of thinking his death was her fault. Samuel promised to look after her. The ride back to Black Hollow took 3 days. The weather held. Eli got stronger every day, eating better, crying louder, sleeping in stretches that almost resembled normal infant patterns.
Garrick watched his son and tried to imagine the future, running the ranch without Dorian, raising a child without Serena, building something new on the ruins of everything he'd trusted. It felt impossible, but then so had surviving the past week. "What will you do?" Mara asked on the second day of riding. "After this?" "I don't know. Run the ranch, I guess. Find a new foreman. Someone I can actually trust." Garrick looked at her. "What about you?"
Testify. Make sure Dorian faces everything he's done, then, she shrugged. "I don't know either." "You could stay?" "At Black Hollow." "As what?" "Whatever you want. Midwife, nurse, someone who makes sure Eli grows up properly." Garrick hesitated. "Someone I can trust." Mara was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not a replacement for Serena." "I know that. And I'm not staying because you need me. I'm staying because that baby deserves someone who knows how to spot danger before it kills him." "Fair enough." She smiled slightly. "Fair enough." They rode in silence for a while. Then Mara said, "You know what Serena told me before she died?" "What?" "She said the hardest thing about being a parent was trusting yourself. Said every decision felt like it could be wrong. Every choice carried weight." Mara looked at Eli, sleeping against Garrick's chest. "But she said the trick was to stop trying to be perfect and just try to be present. To show up and do the work even when you didn't know if it was right." Garrick felt his throat tighten. "Sounds like her." "She also said you were the most stubborn man she'd ever met. That you'd charge into hell itself if you thought it was the right thing to do." Mara's voice softened. "But that you needed someone to point you in the right direction first. Otherwise, you'd just charge in circles." "She wasn't wrong." "No, she wasn't." Mara urged her horse forward. "So let's make sure you keep charging in the right direction, for her, for Eli, for all the families who didn't get justice until now." They reached Black Hollow Ranch just before sunset on the third day. The house looked the same. The barn, the fences, the land stretching out toward mountains that didn't care about human drama. But it felt different. Morrison met them at the gate. His face split into a grin when he saw Eli alive and alert. "You did it," he said. "Saints above, you actually did it." "We did it," Garrick corrected. "You and Blake buying us time. That mattered." "Dorian figured it out pretty quick, but by then you'd already crossed the ravine." Morrison took Garrick's horse. "There's been talk in town about what happened, about the trial. People are saying Dorian Pike was some kind of monster." "He was." "And Dr. Vale?" "Complicit, dead, probably murdered to keep him quiet." Morrison nodded slowly. "There's going to be questions. From families. From the territory. About how none of us saw it. We saw what he wanted us to see. That's how men like Dorian work." Garrick dismounted and helped Mara down. "But now people know, and that's going to have to be enough." They walked toward the house. Cora came running out, tears streaming down her face when she saw Eli. "Oh, that sweet baby. I was so worried. We all were." "He's fine, Cora, thanks to Mara." Cora looked at Mara with something approaching awe. "You saved him." "We saved him," Mara corrected. "All of us." They brought Eli inside. The nursery looked different now, lighter somehow, even though nothing physical had changed. Garrick supposed that was what happened when you stripped away the poison. Everything looked cleaner. Mara checked Eli over one more time. Temperature normal, color good, breathing easy. "He's going to be fine," she said. "Better than fine. He's strong." Garrick believed her. That night, after everyone had settled, Garrick stood in Serena's writing room. The door was still broken from when they'd kicked it in. He'd need to fix that. He sat at her desk and pulled out paper. Started writing. Not a letter, not exactly, just words, things he needed to say to someone who couldn't hear them anymore. He wrote about Eli, about how their son had survived because of her, how her last act had saved not just one child, but potentially dozens more, how the families on her list would finally know the truth. He wrote about Mara, about the strange, weathered woman Serena had trusted when no one else would, about how that trust had been earned and repaid. He wrote about himself, about the mistakes he'd made, the trust he'd misplaced, the grief that still sat heavy in his chest like a stone he'd carry forever. And he wrote about the future, about trying to be the father Serena had believed he could be, about raising their son in a world that was still dangerous and unfair, but maybe slightly better because people like Serena refused to let evil hide behind respectability. When he finished, he folded the letter and put it in the drawer where she'd kept her investigation notes. It wasn't closure, but it was something. The trial happened 6 months later. Dorian Pike was convicted on 8 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud, and conspiracy. The territorial court sentenced him to hang. He showed no emotion when they read the verdict. Garrick attended every day of the trial. So did Mara. So did Naomi, and 5 other mothers whose children had died under Dorian's care. The courtroom was packed. Newspapers sent reporters. The territory wanted to understand how one man had killed so many children without anyone noticing. The answer wasn't complicated. He'd been smart, patient, and positioned himself where grief made people vulnerable. But knowing the answer didn't make it hurt less. After the sentencing, Garrick stood outside the courthouse with Mara and Eli. The baby was 10 months old now, starting to crawl, making sounds that almost resembled words, growing into a child who'd never remember the man who'd tried to kill him. Small mercies. "You all right?" Mara asked. "No," Garrick said honestly, "but I will be." "That's enough." They walked back to the hotel where they were staying. Tomorrow they'd ride back to Black Hollow, back to the ranch that was slowly recovering, back to the work of building a life. But tonight, Garrick held his son and thought about Serena, about a woman who'd ridden through a blizzard because she saw a pattern no one else believed, about courage that looked like stubbornness until it saved lives, about how trust was the hardest thing to rebuild once broken, but worth the effort anyway, and about how sometimes the people society dismissed, the drifters, the outcasts, the women nobody listened to, turned out to be the ones who saved everything. He looked at Mara. "Thank you." "For what?" "For finishing what she started, for not giving up when it would have been easier." "I told you. I was tired of watching powerful men bury their mistakes." Mara took Eli and held him. "Besides, somebody had to make sure this one survived to cause trouble." Eli grabbed her nose and laughed. It was the first time Garrick had heard his son laugh. The sound was better than justice, better than closure, better than anything else the world had offered in the past 6 months. It was proof that life continued, that children grew, that hope existed even after everything tried to kill it. They went back to Black Hollow. Mara stayed, not as a replacement for Serena. That was impossible and wrong to even attempt, but as herself, a woman with her own scars and strengths, someone who knew how to spot danger and wasn't afraid to call it out. Garrick learned to run the ranch without Dorian. It was harder, messier. He made mistakes, but they were his mistakes, and he learned from them. Eli grew, walked at 11 months, said his first word at 13 months, "Ma," looking at Mara. She cried. Garrick did too, because the word wasn't for Serena, but it honored her anyway. Honored the choice she'd made to trust a stranger, to believe that mothers came in forms beyond blood, that family was built through presence, not just biology. On Eli's first birthday, they gathered at Black Hollow. Morrison and Blake, Cora, Samuel and Naomi, who traveled from Red Ravine for the occasion, William Cross, who'd become something like a friend through the trial process. They ate cake, watched Eli smash frosting across his face, laughed at how simple joy could be when you stopped expecting perfection. That night, after everyone had left, Garrick carried Eli to the nursery. The room that had once been a battlefield now smelled like soap and sunshine. Safe, clean, home. He laid his son in the crib and watched him sleep. "Your mother saved you," he whispered. "Never forget that. She saw danger when no one else would, believed the truth when everyone called her crazy, rode into winter to find help because she loved you more than her own life." Eli slept on, oblivious. Garrick continued anyway. "And I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing that courage sometimes looks like asking for help, that the people worth trusting are the ones who tell you hard truths instead of comfortable lies, that respectability means nothing if it hides evil." He thought about Dorian, about Dr. Vale, about all the families who'd lost children because they'd trusted the wrong people. "I'm going to mess this up," Garrick said quietly. "Raising you. I'll make mistakes, say the wrong things, probably be too protective or not protective enough. But I'm going to show up anyway. Every day. Like your mother showed up. Like Mara showed up. Like all the people who fought to keep you alive when it would have been easier to look away. Eli made a small sound in his sleep. Garrick reached down and touched his son's hand. The small fingers curled around his own. And in that moment, Garrick understood what Serena had known all along, that parenthood wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, about showing up even when you were scared, uncertain, broken by grief and doubt. It was about choosing to fight for life even when death seemed easier. He stayed in the nursery for a long time, listening to his son breathe. Outside, the frontier night was cold and dark, and full of dangers he couldn't control. But inside this room, a child slept safe, and that was enough. Not perfect, but enough. Because in the end, that's what survival looked like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people willing to stand between children and the monsters who preyed on them. People like Serena, like Mara, like Naomi and Morrison, and all the others who'd chosen truth over comfort. And now, Garrick hoped, like himself. He left the nursery quietly and walked downstairs where Mara sat by the fire, mending one of Eli's shirts. "He asleep?" she asked. "Finally." "Good. He needs the rest. Growing's hard work." Garrick sat down across from her. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, staying here? You could have moved on after the trial, started fresh somewhere else." Mara set down her mending and looked at him. "You know what I regret? The 10 years I spent running, hiding, believing that because one powerful man destroyed my name, I didn't deserve to stand up again." She picked up the shirt again. "Staying here isn't about you or Eli or this ranch. It's about me deciding I'm done letting fear make my choices." "That's fair. Besides," she smiled slightly, "someone has to make sure you don't charge into hell in the wrong direction." Serena said the same thing. Smart woman. They sat in comfortable silence while the fire burned low. Outside, the wind picked up, the kind of wind that spoke of winter coming again, of cycles repeating, of time moving forward whether you were ready or not. But inside Black Hollow Ranch, a baby slept safe. A father learned what courage looked like. And a woman who'd spent years believing she'd failed finally understood that failure only lasted as long as you stopped trying. The frontier didn't get easier, but the people who survived it got stronger. And sometimes, when justice and mercy and stubborn hope aligned, that was enough to make a difference. Not just for one child, but for all the children who came after. That was Serena's legacy, and Garrick would spend the rest of his life making sure it mattered.